Time moves with the quiet certainty of a shadow across a wall. Death waits like an uninvited guest, who's somehow always been in the room. Purpose. It hides in plain sight, shaping your every choice even when you feel lost. This is not a journey of answers, but of questions that echo, stretch, and dissolve. Tonight, we will explore how the minutes you spend, the final breath you'll take, and the meaning you seek are threads of the same woven tapestry, and how seeing them together might change the way you live, and the way you rest. Imagine a clock not on your wall, but inside your chest. It does not tick with the mechanical neatness of gears and springs, but with the uneven pulse of your own heartbeat. Every beat, every second, is a subtraction. A soft theft from a total you will never know. You are told clocks measure time, but what they really measure is loss. The hands move forward, but each movement is also a movement away, a departure you can't reverse. You see this in the smallest ways, the way your coffee cools while you're distracted, the way a child's laughter changes pitch over years, the way your face in the mirror carries more of your parents than it once did. Time eats, and it prefers quiet meals. It doesn't need to rush, its appetite is patient. The cruel trick is that you help it feed. You trade your minutes for obligations you don't care about, for conversations you don't enjoy, for the scroll of a glowing screen you won't remember. You leave the table before dessert because you think you have more meals ahead. You pass on the trip because there will be time later. You save your best clothes for a special occasion that might never come. And the clock inside you doesn't argue. It takes what you give. It takes the mornings you hurry through, the nights you waste on worries that never arrive, the opportunities you let slip by because the risk seemed too heavy. It is always hungry, but it never needs to snatch food from your hands. You place it there yourself. Sometimes you think you hear it ticking. It's usually in moments of stillness, staring at the ceiling in the dark, or waiting in a silent room where even the air feels paused. You might call it anxiety, but it's something older and truer, the faint awareness that you are being consumed. Yet this is not a call to panic. If anything, it's an invitation to feed the clock on purpose. If you must lose time, lose it to something worth losing it for. Let it eat the minutes you spend watching the sunrise. Even though you've seen hundreds before, let it devour the hours you give to creating, building, learning, laughing. Let it be nourished by the risks you take, not the safety you settle for. You will never stop the clock. You cannot freeze the hands. You cannot claw back the moments it has swallowed, but you can decide what kind of life it digests. You can choose whether the slow consumption leaves behind a husk of routines or the bones of a feast. And when the last bite comes, perhaps it will taste of something richer than fear. The clock will eat your life, but you decide whether it dines on scraps or banquets. And that choice is, in the strangest way, the one thing the clock can never take from you. There are moments when a single second stretches until it feels like an entire lifetime. Not in the poetic sense, but in the strange physical way that time itself seems to pause, as if reluctant to move forward. You've felt it before. The second before a car nearly hits you. The second between a doctor's face tightening and their mouth opening to speak. The second before you hear whether the voice on the other end of the phone will say the thing you've been hoping for, or the thing you've been fearing. In those seconds, reality bends. The world grows unnaturally detailed, like someone turned up the resolution on existence. You notice the hum of a light you've never heard before, the tremor in your own fingers, the slow rise of your chest as air refuses to leave. Everything is illuminated and unbearable. And then the second ends, time resumes its normal speed, and the world's edges blur again. It's tempting to think these moments are rare accidents, but they're not. They are proof that time is not the steady river you've been told it is. Time is elastic, and you are its unwitting sculptor. When your mind is jolted into hyper-awareness, seconds become as wide as oceans. When you're bored or distracted, they collapse into a flat, unremarkable smear. Children know this instinctively. For them, a summer afternoon can last forever, each minute heavy with the taste of melting ice cream, the scratch of grass on bare skin, the distant buzz of cicadas. But as you grow older, the seconds seem to accelerate, not because the clock changes, but because you do. You stop noticing. You compress the richness of moments into vague summaries. That year went by so fast, you say, but it's not the year. It's your perception that's shrunk it down. When seconds become infinite, it's often because something important is at stake. Your safety, your love, your future. Your mind refuses to let the moment slip by without marking it. The cruel irony is that many of your happiest times pass too quickly because you're too immersed to notice them. while some of your most agonizing moments stretch into eternities you wish you could escape. But here lies a strange possibility. What if you could stretch more seconds on purpose? Not just in fear or crisis, but in wonder. The trick isn't in controlling time, but in controlling attention. Look too quickly, and the moment is gone before it arrives. Look deeply enough, and the moment will expand to hold you inside it. Sit by a window on a rainy day, and really watch the drops trace paths down the glass. Walk barefoot in the grass, and feel every blade bend under your skin. Listen to a loved one's voice, and catch the smallest inflections, the breaths between their words. These seconds won't last forever, but they will last longer, and when you remember them, they'll have the density of entire days. There's an unsettling side to this too. In moments of suffering, you might wish time would hurry up and pass, but the mind insists on stretching the agony instead. A hospital waiting room, a goodbye you don't want to give, the final minutes before a decision you can't take back. These are infinite seconds you never asked for, yet they are stitched into the fabric of your life as tightly as any joy. Perhaps that's the lesson hidden here, that infinity isn't a place you reach after death, or a mathematical abstraction. It's here, inside your lived moments, whenever attention and significance meet. Sometimes that significance is beautiful, sometimes it's unbearable, but both remind you that time is not a constant. It's a shapeshifter, a trickster, willing to warp itself according to your state of mind. And so you move between infinities. Some you welcome, some you dread. You will experience them in love, in pain, in surprise, in loss. You will wish some could last longer, and others could disappear altogether. But each of these moments is proof that you are alive inside the machinery of time, not merely being carried along by it. One day, at the very end, you may find yourself in another infinite second, the last one. People who have faced death and returned often describe the same thing, how the final instant felt as wide as an entire lifetime, filled with memories, sensations, and an overwhelming clarity. If that's true, then perhaps your last moment will not be a blur, but an eternity, in which every joy and every sorrow is gathered together, held in place, and illuminated, before you step into whatever comes next. Until then, the infinite seconds will keep arriving, both wanted and unwanted. Your task is not to control them, you can't. Your task is to recognize them when they arrive, to step into them fully, and to let them expand you as much as you allow them to expand themselves. Because the truth is, infinity is never far away, it's hiding inside the very second you're living right now. Somewhere, not in space, not in time as you know it. There exists a place where every wasted hour of your life is buried. You can't see it, but you can feel it if you stay still long enough. It's the faint ache that appears when you think about all the books you never finished, the conversations you postponed until they evaporated, the projects you abandoned halfway through because something else caught your attention. This graveyard is not marked by stone and marble, but by the weight of moments you'll never get back. Each headstone in this invisible cemetery carries no name, no date, only the cause of death. Distraction, fear, laziness, indecision, doubt. Some are tiny markers for hours that slipped away without you noticing, the time you idly scrolled through glowing screens, chasing novelty but finding only repetition. Others are towering monuments for years you spent in the wrong place, with the wrong people, living the wrong story because you thought it was the safe choice. We don't often think about the cost of time until it's too late. Money spent can sometimes be earned back. Possessions lost can be replaced. But hours are non-refundable. Once they go into the ground, there's no digging them up. You can't exhume an afternoon to use it more wisely. You can't retrieve a year to live it differently. The graveyard keeps its dead. If you could walk through it, you might be surprised by what you find there. Not all the headstones would mark moments of inaction. Some would belong to hours that were full of activity, yet still wasted, the meetings that led nowhere, the arguments over nothing, the years you spent working toward someone else's dream while your own collected dust in the corner. Wasted time doesn't always look like nothing happening. Sometimes it looks like everything happening in the wrong direction. And here is the unsettling truth. You are building this graveyard right now. Every choice you make, every moment you trade away, determines what will be buried here. The difference is that you still have a say in what fills it. You can't empty it of what's already gone, but you can decide whether tomorrow's hours are buried in regret or planted like seeds. The strange mercy in all this is that the graveyard is silent. It doesn't shout your failures at you. It doesn't haunt you in the traditional sense. It waits patiently for you to wander in and look around. Some people never do, they prefer not to know, but those who do, those who walk the rows of their wasted hours, often leave with a different way of living. They stop pretending that time is infinite. They start guarding their hours as if they were rare jewels, because they are. Sometimes, in dreams, people describe visiting this place. They see long rows of chairs, where they once sat waiting for life to happen, dusty workbenches where abandoned projects still lie, tables set for dinners that never took place. In these dreams, the air feels heavy, almost damp, as if each wasted hour carries the condensation of possibility, water that could have flowed, but never did. It's not wrong to rest. It's not wrong to spend an afternoon doing nothing, if that nothing feels like nourishment. The graveyard does not claim those hours. It only claims the ones you give away without thought, the ones you lose to the hollow spaces between wanting and doing. One day, in your final moments, you may see this place in your mind. You may walk its quiet rows and recognize the hours you carelessly let slip away. That realization could be crushing. Or, if you've lived deliberately enough, it could be a small, sparse graveyard, easy to cross without feeling lost in its expanse. But here's the secret most people never realize until too late. The graveyard of wasted hours is also bordered by a garden, right on the edge, where the grass begins to green again. You'll find the hours you used well, the late-night talks that changed how you saw the world, the afternoons spent learning something that set your soul alight, the time you gave to love without expecting anything back. You can't bring the dead hours into the garden, but you can plant new ones right beside it. And if you plant enough, their roots will spread, and the graveyard will stop growing. Right now, you are the caretaker of both. You choose which side gets more of your attention. You choose whether your days end up as flowers or gravestones. And perhaps the best way to honor the hours you've already lost is not to mourn them endlessly, but to make sure fewer follow. The graveyard will always exist. The question is, how much of your life you decide to give it. If you listen closely enough, not with your ears, but with that strange inner sense that notices things before your mind has words for them, you can hear it. A whisper, not urgent, not loud, just steady. It rides the wind, curling between the branches of trees, slipping through cracks in doorways, brushing across your cheek when you're alone outside at night. It is not the wind itself, but something carried on it. Death's voice. It doesn't sound like the grim pronouncement you might expect. There is no deep, echoing threat. It's quieter than that, almost gentle, like a reminder rather than a warning. If anything, it's a statement of fact. I am coming. I have always been coming. And you have always known. Some people hear it more often than others. Those who've lost someone suddenly. Those who've stood close enough to feel the cold edge of it without quite stepping over. Those who've been sick enough to wonder if the night would let them see morning. For them, the whisper isn't occasional. It's part of the background hum of life. The same way you stop noticing the sound of your refrigerator until it goes silent. But even if you're young, even if you're healthy, you've felt it in flashes. The moment you almost stepped into the path of a car. The time you held your breath underwater, just a little too long. The sudden, unshakable thought of what if I didn't wake up tomorrow. These are small, sharp gusts in which the whisper becomes clear. The strange thing is that death doesn't speak to frighten you. Fear is a side effect. Yes, but not the purpose. The whisper is meant to make you notice, to pull you back into the present when you've been living as if the present is disposable. When the wind carries that sound, it can turn the most ordinary scene into something electric. The streetlight on a deserted road, the way the clouds seem to move faster than they should, the feel of your own pulse in your wrist. Suddenly, everything becomes a reminder. You are temporary. Everything you see is temporary, and that should make it matter more, not less. Yet we resist listening. We shut windows when the whisper gets too loud. We fill our lives with noise, music, conversation, endless streams of content, so we don't have to hear it. We tell ourselves that thinking about death too much is morbid, but the truth is, ignoring it is far more dangerous. Because the whisper isn't just about endings, it's also about urgency. It says, if you are going to love someone, do it now. If you are going to start the thing you've been dreaming of, do it now. If you are going to forgive, to risk, to tell the truth, do it now. The wind carries this message every day, but most of us only stop to listen when something forces us to. There is a kind of freedom in hearing it regularly. Those who live with a constant awareness of death often live more intensely. They don't waste as much time on grudges, on meaningless goals, on pretending they don't care about the things they desperately do. They are quicker to laugh, quicker to leave a situation that doesn't feel right, quicker to see beauty in things most of us overlook. But there's also a weight to it. The whisper is not soft for everyone. For some, it's a cold draft in every room, a reminder so constant it can be exhausting. Living with that awareness means accepting not only your own fragility, but the fragility of everything you love, and there are days when that feels like too much to hold. Still, the whisper never lies. It never promises more time than you have. It never tells you that you'll be ready, and perhaps that's its mercy. It refuses to let you sleep through your own life. If you go outside tonight, stand still and listen. Feel the air move across your skin. Somewhere in it, beneath the rustle of leaves or the hum of distant traffic, you will catch it. Faint but undeniable, it will not shout. It doesn't need to, it knows you've already heard it before. And once you've heard it, truly heard it, you can't unhear it. It will echo inside you at odd times, in the quiet after laughter, in the middle of a long drive, in the last moment before you fall asleep. And each time, it will ask you the same silent question: what will you do with what's left? Because death's whisper is not meant to paralyze you, it's meant to wake you up, and the wind, whether you like it or not, will keep carrying it until the day you no longer need the reminder. It's an easy lie to believe, maybe the easiest one of all. There will be more time to say the thing you didn't say today, more time to take the trip, to make the call, to fix the damage, to start the dream you've been keeping in the attic of your mind. The illusion of endless tomorrows is the warmest blanket you can wrap yourself in, and it's the reason so many people sleep through their lives without ever realizing it. We don't just believe it, we live as if it were law. We postpone joy because it feels reckless to have it now. We postpone risk because we think there's a better moment ahead. We postpone apologies because the wound isn't old enough yet. We convince ourselves that waiting is maturity, when sometimes it's just fear with better PR. The dangerous part is that this illusion rarely shatters in a neat, cinematic way. It doesn't end with a sudden lightning bolt of clarity. More often, it dies quietly, in a small, irreversible moment. The phone call you meant to make but the person is already gone. The opportunity you thought would come around again, but it never does. The friendship you thought could be paused, only to find it rotted in the stillness. If you could see your life laid out like a map, every tomorrow would be a fading light, growing dimmer the further out it stretches. But from where you stand, they all look equally bright. You don't notice that some of them are already missing, that some will never arrive. You walk as if the road has no edge. This is how we end up making bargains with ourselves. I'll start after this week. I'll go when I have more money. I'll try when the timing feels right. But the truth is, the timing never feels right. There is no perfect window where the risk is low and the reward is certain. And so, while we wait for the weather to change, the seasons pass, the years turn, and we discover that we've been preparing for a tomorrow that doesn't exist. The illusion is seductive because it keeps us comfortable. If we believe we have infinite tomorrows, we don't have to choose. We don't have to say no to anything, because we can always say yes later. We don't have to face the terror of finality. And yet, it's this comfort that dulls us, that makes us forget that life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to run through the scenes over and over until you're ready to perform. Sometimes, it takes someone else's ending to wake us up. A sudden loss, an obituary for someone younger than you, a reminder that even the healthiest hearts can stop without warning. For a few days you live differently. You send the text, you take the risk, you savor the morning light, and then, slowly the illusion rebuilds itself. You start pushing things back again, reassuring yourself that tomorrow is guaranteed. But what if you stopped doing that? What if you treated each day not as a brick in an endless road, but as a one-of-a-kind stone, irreplaceable, unrepeatable, the only one you will ever stand on? How differently would you speak to the people you love? How quickly would you cut away the things that drain you? How much more fiercely would you protect your time from being stolen? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Living as if tomorrow is infinite makes it easier to waste today. And when you waste enough todays, you wake up one morning to find you've built a life that doesn't feel like yours. You may still be breathing, but you're living inside a waiting room, your number never called. Breaking this illusion doesn't mean living in a panic. It doesn't mean quitting your job and chasing every impulse like a runaway fire. It means carrying the knowledge of fragility without letting it crush you. It means choosing with the awareness that the choice might be your last chance. It means asking yourself, not will I get to do this someday, but what if this is my only day to do it? And yes, Some days will still be ordinary. Some days will be dull, repetitive, unremarkable. But when you start seeing tomorrows for what they are, not a guarantee, but a gift, even those dull days start to matter more. You see the beauty in the uneventful, because you know it is just as finite as the extraordinary. One day, the last tomorrow will arrive. You won't know it's the last until it's almost over. You'll wake up expecting another after it, and you won't get one. And when that day comes, you will either look back and see a trail of moments you lived fully, or a pile of moments you left unopened, because you thought you had more. The illusion of endless tomorrows is a sweet lie. Breaking it is bitter at first. But on the other side of that bitterness is something sharper, truer, and far more alive. The understanding that life is not waiting for you, it is moving, and the only way to meet it is to move with it now. There are hours that vanish like smoke, slipping through your fingers before you even realize they were there. And then there are hours, or minutes, or seconds, that do the opposite. They sit heavy in the air, unmoving, as if the machinery of time has jammed and left you suspended in place. You look at the clock, certain that 5 minutes must have passed, only to see the same number staring back at you. It happens in waiting rooms, where the smell of disinfectant and the soft hum of fluorescent lights make every second feel swollen. It happens in classrooms when you're counting the ticks until the bell. It happens in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, when the dark seems endless and the morning refuses to arrive. These moments are not just slow, they are motionless, like flies caught in amber. When time refuses to move, you become hyper-aware of yourself. The sound of your breathing becomes intrusive. The texture of your own skin feels unfamiliar. Thoughts loop, circling the same worry, the same question, the same memory, until you can't tell if you've been thinking for a minute or for an hour. The world outside continues its rhythm, but inside your mind, the tempo has stopped. Scientists might tell you this is perception, not reality, that time is moving at its usual pace, but your brain has lost its sense of flow. They might explain it as a function of attention. When your mind has nothing engaging to hold on to, it stretches each moment out like dough. But knowing this doesn't make it easier to endure. The slowness is not just mental, it's physical, emotional, almost existential. Sometimes, the stillness is unbearable. You want the moment to end, but it clings. You want the page to turn, but the story won't advance. You feel trapped in a room where the door is unlocked, yet you can't make yourself leave. These are the kinds of moments where anxiety thrives, because the more you want time to move, the more stubbornly it stays put. And yet, there's another side to this stillness. There are rare times when it feels like a gift. When you're holding someone you love, and the moment lingers longer than it should. When you're standing in a quiet forest, and the air seems thick with something ancient. When the sun is setting, and you swear the light takes its time melting into the horizon just for you. In these cases, the refusal of time to move is not a trap, but an act of mercy. This duality is part of what makes these moments so strange. The same slowing can feel like torture or like grace, depending on the frame you bring to it. The waiting room drags, because you're anticipating an answer you can't control. The sunset lingers because you're surrendering to something you can't control. The difference is not in the minutes themselves, it's in the weight you give them. When time refuses to move, your mind has an opportunity. If you let it, you can turn inward. Not in restless impatience, but in deliberate stillness. You can notice the details you normally miss. The faint creak in the chair beneath you, the way the air smells after rain, the exact shade of the sky when the day is neither bright nor dark. These are things that disappear in the rush of faster hours, but they reveal themselves when the clock seems stuck. Of course, this is easier said than done. Most of us spend slow moments fighting them, trying to speed them up with distraction. We reach for our phones, we invent small tasks, we push the seconds forward in our minds, and when that doesn't work, we stew in frustration. But there's a kind of strange peace in giving up the fight, in accepting that this moment will end when it ends, not when you demand it to. It's worth remembering that time never truly stops. Even when it feels motionless, change is happening in the background. The earth is still rotating. Your cells are still dividing. Somewhere, oceans are pulling away from shores, while winds are reshaping clouds. You are simply caught in the experience of slowness, not in the actual suspension of reality. And then, inevitably, the stillness breaks. The bell rings, the sun dips, the door opens, the night gives way to morning. Time starts moving again, often without you realizing the exact moment it did. You only notice in hindsight, when you're on the other side, looking back at how endless it felt. There's a quiet lesson here. The moments that refuse to move are still part of your life, and they still count. You may not love them, but they belong to you as much as the fast, joyful ones do. In fact, they might matter more, because they force you to confront yourself without the blur of momentum. And maybe that's the truth. Hiding in the slowest hour's time isn't refusing to move at all. It's asking you to catch up. There's the death people talk about. The one with the still body, the quiet room, the final heartbeat. And then there's the other death, the one that comes earlier, sometimes years earlier, and takes something far more essential than breath. This second death doesn't leave you cold in a bed. It leaves you alive, but smaller, diminished. It is the moment you stop being entirely yourself. It can happen gradually, like a candle guttering out in stages. You give up a dream here. You surrender a part of your curiosity there. You stop speaking your mind because it's easier to stay quiet. Piece by piece, your edges are worn down until you are smooth and shapeless, easy to move, easy to forget. From the outside, you look fine, maybe even better than fine, but inside, something important has gone still. For some, the moment comes suddenly. A betrayal that cuts so deep you no longer trust the way you used to. A failure that crushes the part of you that believed you could rise again. A loss that tears away the person who gave your days their meaning. In that moment, something in you dies that no one else can see. You keep moving, speaking, eating, but you are not the same. The body is resilient. It will carry on long after the soul has taken a seat in the back row. You can function, work, laugh, even love again, without fully resurrecting that lost part. And maybe that's the most unsettling thing. How easy it is to keep living after you've already died in some quiet, invisible way. If you think back, you might be able to pinpoint your own first death. It could have been in childhood, the day you realized the world was not as safe as you'd been told. Or maybe it was later, in adulthood, when the gap between the life you wanted and the life you had grew too wide to cross. You may not have given it a name at the time, but you felt it, the snap, the silence, the shift. The first death is not always permanent. People do come back from it, though never exactly as they were before. The scar remains, and sometimes the scar becomes a map, a reminder of where you've been and what you've survived. The resurrection comes slowly through choices that make you feel alive again, creating something with your hands, going somewhere unfamiliar, speaking truth you've held back for too long. But many never return. They live out their years in a kind of half-light, convinced that this is all there is. They no longer expect to be surprised, no longer hunger for more. They wait for the final death, the way someone waits for a bus. Inevitable, impersonal, the next step in a process they stopped caring about long ago. And yet, there is a strange mercy in recognizing this earlier death. It teaches you that life is not a single unbroken thread, but a series of strands that can snap and be knotted together again. It warns you that your aliveness is not guaranteed just because you are breathing. It urges you to protect the parts of yourself that give you vitality, the curiosity, the courage, the capacity to love recklessly, as fiercely as you would protect your own heartbeat. Some say you truly die the last time someone speaks your name. Others say it's the last time you think your own life could still surprise you. But maybe it's simpler. Maybe you truly die the moment you stop wanting to get up in the morning for reasons beyond habit. The moment you stop caring what happens next. The moment you no longer feel a thread pulling you towards something ahead. If you're still alive in the biological sense, there's always the chance to reverse it. You can breathe life back into yourself in ways that have nothing to do with medical miracles. Sometimes it's as small as changing your daily route, so the scenery surprises you again. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to want more, even when wanting feels dangerous. Sometimes it's forgiving yourself for the years you spent in the half-light, and choosing to step into the sun again. The final death will come soon enough, in its own time, in its own way. You can't bargain it away, and you can't know the hour. But this earlier death, the one that creeps in through resignation, fear, or loss, that one you can fight. You can notice when it's approaching, feel when it's trying to settle in your bones, and push back before it claims you entirely. Because as long as you still have something inside you that refuses to settle, you are not finished yet. And maybe the true measure of your life won't be how long you lived, but how many times you brought yourself back from the edge of that first death, choosing again and again to keep something alive inside you, even when it would have been easier to let it go. You have been taught to imagine eternity as something distant, a vast, unending stretch that begins after this life ends. For some, it is a promised paradise. For others, an endless void. Either way, It's somewhere else. Someone else. But what if eternity isn't waiting for you at the end? What if it's already here, hiding inside the smallest moments of your everyday life, available to you in flashes if you know how to see it? Most of the time, you miss it. You move too quickly, thinking of what's next, where you're going, what you still have to do. You walk past the open window, without noticing the way the air smells different after rain. You sit across from someone you love, without truly seeing their face in this exact light, at this exact moment in their life. You eat without tasting. You breathe without feeling the shape of the breath in your body. Eternity lives in those unnoticed moments, not as a stretch of endless time, but as a suspension of it. It appears when the boundaries between past, present, and future dissolve, and there is only this. The laugh you didn't expect, that makes you forget the hour. The sudden warmth of the sun on your neck after days of grey. The way music can hold you in place so completely, that you stop thinking about where you are. It can happen anywhere, in the middle of a crowded street, in a quiet bedroom at dawn, in the aisles of a grocery store when a stranger smiles at you for no reason. It's not about the setting, it's about your attention. You don't step into eternity by chasing it. You step into it by noticing what's already here, and realizing it is complete in itself. This is why some moments feel longer than they should. In a few seconds of genuine presence, you can hold an entire lifetime. Think about the last time you were so absorbed in something that you lost track of time completely. Hours passed, but you didn't feel them pass. You were living fully in the now, and in doing so, you were living outside the clock altogether. That's the doorway to eternity. It's tempting to think you can keep it open forever, but you can't. Eternity in the now is fragile. The moment you start trying to hold on to it, it slips away. The mind rushes back in with its lists, its worries, its hunger for the next thing. This is not failure. It's the nature of being human. Our attention flickers. Our awareness drifts. The gift is not in clinging to eternity, but in recognizing it when it comes and letting it come often. Some people find this in meditation, in stillness, in the slow rhythm of the breath. Others find it in movement, running, dancing, swimming, anything that dissolves the barrier between body and mind. For some, it's in art or music. For others, in nature. The form doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of your presence, the depth with which you inhabit the moment. You might think eternity is an escape from mortality, but it's not. If anything, the awareness of death sharpens your ability to see it. When you know the hourglass is always emptying, you notice the weight of every grain of sand, you stop rushing past the details. You start realizing that the only part of eternity you can touch is the now, and that this has always been enough. The paradox is that the now is fleeting and eternal at the same time. It disappears the moment you notice it. Yet it is always here, waiting for you to return. You can step into it 1,000 times a day if you let yourself. You can live entire eternities between sunrise and sunset, between one breath and the next. And here is the quiet truth that changes everything. When you live this way, you stop fearing the end as much. Death may still take you, but it cannot take the moments you've lived fully. Those moments exist outside the reach of the clock, untouched by decay. In them you have already tasted something infinite. The trick is not to seek eternity as an escape from life, but to find it inside life, to drink your coffee slowly enough, to feel its warmth radiating into your hands, to listen to someone's story without thinking about your reply, to stand under the night sky, and let the sheer size of it erase every false urgency you carry. You will not be able to do this all the time. You will forget. You will get lost in noise and hurry and distraction. But each time you remember, each time you drop back into the now and feel it open wide beneath you, you will know that eternity is not something you earn or travel toward. It is something you touch, over and over, until the final time you touch it and never have to let go. You make thousands of choices every day. What to eat, what to wear, where to go, what to say. Most feel trivial, but each one exists in the shadow of the same fact: you are going to die. This isn't morbid philosophy. It's basic arithmetic. You have a finite number of decisions left to make, and every one you spend is one you will never get back. You might not think about mortality when you choose your breakfast or decide whether to return a text, but deep down it's always there, like a silent background frequency. It influences not only what you choose, but how you choose, whether you act out of fear, comfort, curiosity, or courage. It shapes the scale on which you measure your life. Imagine for a moment that you could live forever. No aging, no illness, no deadline. Your choices would change immediately. You might put off learning something new for centuries. You might avoid taking risks because there's no urgency to make your days count. Without the pressure of an ending, your life would expand in possibility, but shrink in intensity. The stakes would be lower because time would be infinite. But you don't live forever, and whether you acknowledge it or not, that fact sharpens the edges of your decisions. When you know the number of days is limited, even if you don't know the exact number, you feel the pull to make them matter. This is why mortality is not just an ending to fear, it's a compass to follow. It can strip away illusions about what really matters, and leave you with the raw truth of what you actually want. Some choices seem small, but carry the weight of mortality in them. Choosing to call your friend back instead of doing it tomorrow acknowledges that there may not be another chance. Choosing to spend the evening with your child instead of answering one more email accepts that their childhood is already disappearing. Choosing to say, "I love you," even when it feels awkward, is a quiet rebellion against the idea that time will always give you another opportunity. Mortality doesn't only push you toward people and moments. It also helps you let go. It whispers that you don't have the luxury of spending years in the wrong place, with the wrong person, in the wrong work. It asks whether the things you are sacrificing your time for will matter when you reach the end. Sometimes, that question alone can unravel entire lives built on habit instead of purpose. The awareness of death is uncomfortable, and so most of us bury it under layers of distraction. We convince ourselves we'll think about it later, as if later is guaranteed. But the truth is, living as if death is far away can make you careless with your days. You start trading hours for things you don't actually care about, because you believe there will always be more to spend. There's a reason people who survive close brushes with death often transform their lives afterward. They have seen the clock up close, and they understand in their bones what the rest of us only know intellectually. The supply is running out. They start choosing differently. They say no more often. They take the trip now. They tell people the truth. They spend less time in rooms that drain them, and more time in places that make them feel alive. This doesn't mean every choice must be grand or life-changing. Mortality shapes the small choices too. The way you savor your coffee in the morning, the way you watch the light shift on the walls, the way you decide to listen fully instead of half hearing someone while scrolling through your phone. These are the choices that, over time, create the texture of a life you won't regret. The paradox is that while mortality limits your time, it expands your attention. It forces you to see that this moment, not the next one, not the ideal one, is the only place where life actually happens. When you let that truth guide your choices, you stop living as if you are rehearsing. You start living as if the curtain could drop at any time. Of course, you will forget this truth. We all do. We get pulled back into the noise, the routines, the mindless drift. But mortality is patient. It will keep reminding you, in small ways and large, that your choices are shaping a story with an ending. You can ignore it, or you can let it sharpen your vision, so that when the end does come, you can look back and say, "I chose well, I chose fully." In the end, mortality doesn't just take your life, it gives it shape. Without it, your days would blur into one another. With it, every choice becomes a brushstroke in a finite painting. Every decision an act of creation in the only life you will ever have. And that, if you allow it, can be the most liberating truth of all. You hang it on your wall, or open it on your phone, and it looks harmless. Just boxes and numbers, neat rows that make time feel orderly. The calendar pretends to be your ally. It helps you plan, helps you remember, helps you see the future in small, manageable pieces. But behind its tidy grid lies a quiet deception. It convinces you that life is made of days, when in truth, it is made of moments. The calendar tells you that next Thursday is just another square to be filled. It gives you the illusion of control, as if by writing something down you've secured it. It lets you think you have time blocked, for joy, for love, for meaning, when in reality, those things can't be scheduled into a box without losing some of their life. It also hides the truth about how much you have left. The calendar shows endless months scrolling forward, one after another, as if they will never stop. It will never say, "You have only 1,420 weeks left if you're lucky." It will never highlight the last birthday you will ever celebrate, or the last spring you will ever see. It will keep showing future Decembers, even though one of them will be your last, and you'll never know which one it is until it's gone. This is the betrayal. The calendar makes time look abundant, even when it's running out. You look ahead and think you have space. Space to delay the hard conversation. Space to postpone the trip. Space to live the way you want someday. You trust that the squares will keep coming, and so you spend them like loose change, not realizing they are gold coins slipping through your fingers. Some people see through the trick after a close call, an illness, a loss, a brush with death, that makes them realize the grid is not infinite. They stop treating the boxes as promises and start treating them as possibilities. They understand that the calendar can be a useful tool, but only if they remember that the real clock doesn't care about the neatness of its squares. If you've ever flipped back through an old calendar, you know the other betrayal it holds. Most of the days are blank. The meetings you thought were so important have vanished from your memory. The deadlines that ruled your life no longer matter. All that remains are the rare marks that actually meant something. The weekend you spent by the sea, the evening you laughed until your stomach hurt, the night you stayed up late, talking with someone who mattered. Everything else, no matter how busy it kept you, has dissolved. The calendar keeps no record of how alive you felt on any given day. It can't measure the depth of a conversation, or the quiet beauty of an ordinary moment. It counts days, but not their weight. It tells you how many Mondays you've lived through, but not which ones you'll carry with you to the end. This is why the betrayal isn't malicious. It's structural. The calendar is built for keeping track, not for keeping meaning. If you forget that distinction, you risk living a life full of days but empty of moments. You risk filling every square with commitments, and still arriving at the end wondering where it all went. The truth is, the calendar is at its most honest when it's nearly empty. When you see the space between the obligations, you remember that life happens in those spaces. The unscheduled hours when you decide to walk in the park, call a friend, sit quietly in your own company. Those blank spaces are where memory is made, where meaning grows. There's a quiet rebellion in refusing to let the calendar own you, in leaving some boxes empty on purpose, in writing down not just meetings and chores, but the things that make you feel alive and treating them with the same seriousness as any deadline, in crossing out a commitment because something more important, something more human has appeared. One day, your calendar will stop. There will be a last date circled, a final plan you never carry out. Whoever closes that book or deletes that app will see only an ending, but you will know whether the days leading up to it were filled with the kind of moments that outlive the squares they occupied. The betrayal is real, but so is the choice. You can use the calendar to keep track of your life, or you can let it quietly trick you into thinking the life you want is always in the future. The first choice gives you structure. The second steals your days without you even noticing. And maybe the best way to break the spell is simple. Stop looking at the boxes so much. Look at the moment you are in. Feel the air in the room, the sound of the world around you, the pulse of your own body. This, not next week, not next year, is the real time you have, and it will never fit neatly into a square. An hourglass is meant to measure time in a way that feels tangible. You can see the grains of sand falling, one by one, piling up in the lower chamber, while the upper empties. It's an honest clock. You know exactly how much is left, and exactly how much is gone. But what happens when you hold an hourglass that contains no sand at all? At first glance, it's still beautiful. The glass curves gracefully. The narrow neck looks ready to pinch the flow into a perfect rhythm, but it's useless. Without sand, there's no measure, no movement, no visible proof that anything is happening. It sits in your hand like a promise that can't be kept. This is what it feels like to live without a sense of your own time. You keep turning your life over, expecting the grains to fall, but nothing changes. You go through your days with the shape of meaning, but not the substance. You have a body that moves, eats, sleeps, but no sense of urgency, no awareness that each breath is part of a dwindling supply. The hourglass without sand is the perfect metaphor for denial. We all hold one in our minds, a beautiful object we pretend is full, because the truth of its emptiness is too uncomfortable. We like to believe our days are still there, waiting to be poured out in an orderly, predictable way. We like to imagine we can flip the glass over whenever we want, starting fresh, without losing anything. But reality doesn't work that way. The sand is already falling, whether you can see it or not. You might have 1,000 grains left. You might have 5. The problem is that the glass of your life isn't transparent. You can't see how much is in the top, how much is in the bottom, or how quickly it's flowing. The danger of the hourglass without sand is that it tricks you into thinking you have endless turns left. You delay the important conversations. You keep your art, your love, your truth locked away for the right moment. You avoid the risk, telling yourself the opportunity will come around again. And because there's no sand falling in front of you, you can almost believe it. This illusion is seductive because it keeps you calm. A full hourglass can be stressful. You see the sand slipping away, and it forces you to choose what matters. But with no sand, there's no visible loss. The cost of waiting is hidden. You feel safe, and in that safety, years can pass. Then, something happens that shatters the illusion. A diagnosis, a sudden loss, a near miss. You realize, with a shock, that the hourglass never had sand you could replace. Only sand you were already spending without seeing it. You were always in the middle of the flow. You just didn't notice. Some people respond to this realization with panic. They scramble to do everything at once, trying to pour meaning into every moment. But that urgency burns out quickly. The truth is, you can't reclaim the sand that's already fallen. All you can do is honor the grains that are left. To live with this awareness is to accept that the glass will one day be empty, and that this is not a tragedy, but a fact. The tragedy would be to reach the bottom without ever having noticed the fall, to have spent your days staring at a static glass, imagining you had more than you did. So how do you live with an invisible hourglass? You learn to measure time by presence instead of volume. You can't count the grains, but you can decide how deeply you feel each one. You can give your full attention to the conversation you're in, instead of letting it drift past. You can step outside and feel the weather on your skin, not just glance at it through a window. You can taste your food, hold your loved ones a little longer, and make room for the work that matters to you before the glass runs out. Some days, you'll forget. You'll fall back into the comfort of pretending the hourglass is waiting for you, untouched. That's human. But the memory will return. In the quiet of the night, in the stillness between tasks, in the sudden awareness that you are here now, and one day you won't be. And each time it returns, it will give you another chance to choose how to spend what's left. The hourglass without sand is both a warning and a gift. The warning is that time is always moving, even when you can't see it. The gift is that the absence of visible grains forces you to live without knowing your exact limit, which means you have to treat every grain as if it might be your last. And maybe that's the best way to live. Not counting, not hoarding, but pouring your attention into the moment you hold, letting it be enough, because it is all you truly have. There are days when your purpose feels solid, a stone you can hold in your hands, a path you can walk without hesitation, and then there are days when it feels like smoke, curling away before you can grasp it. You reach for it, certain you know what you're after, only to have it dissolve between your fingers. It's not that it's gone, it's that it refuses to be caught. This is the nature of purpose. It is not always a fixed point on the map. Sometimes it is a horizon that shifts as you move toward it. Sometimes it is clear in the morning and hazy by nightfall. The dangerous part is not that it changes, but that when it feels like smoke, you start to believe it isn't real at all. Smoke is tricky. It looks like it has weight, shape, presence, until you touch it. Purpose is like that when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you've been living too long according to someone else's expectations. You see glimpses of it, but the moment you try to pin it down, it slips away, and when that happens enough times, you begin to wonder whether it ever existed in the first place. The truth is, purpose is rarely a single, permanent thing. It shifts over the course of your life, sometimes subtly, sometimes in ways that feel like starting over entirely. The purpose you had in your 20s may not be the one you have in your 40s. What drives you after a loss will not be the same as what drives you in the middle of building something new, like smoke. It changes shape depending on the light, the wind, and the fuel that feeds it. When your purpose feels like smoke, you may be tempted to wait for it to solidify before acting. You may think, once I'm sure, I'll begin. But that's the trap. The waiting becomes endless. Purpose doesn't always appear before you start moving. Often, it reveals itself because you started moving. You breathe life into it by living, by trying, by taking small steps, even when you're unsure of the direction. This uncertainty can be exhausting, especially in a world that demands clarity. We are taught to speak confidently about our goals, to present ourselves as people who know exactly what they want. Admitting that your purpose feels like smoke can make you feel like you're failing at life. But the truth is, most people are faking certainty. They too are tracing the outlines of something they can't quite hold. There's another truth about smoke. It can fill a room, even when it's invisible. Just because you can't see or hold your purpose, doesn't mean it isn't shaping your choices. You may already be living it in ways you don't recognize, in the things you keep returning to, in the people you feel drawn toward, in the moments that leave you quietly satisfied, even if no one else notices. Purpose feels like smoke when the gap between where you are and where you think you should be grows too wide. Sometimes, the only way to shrink that gap is to lower your gaze from the distant horizon and look at what's right in front of you. Ask yourself, what feels alive today? What pulls me toward it? Even slightly. Follow that, even if it's small, especially if it's small. Because smoke, for all its elusiveness, is a sign of fire. If you pay attention to the direction it's drifting, you might find the flame, and the flame, no matter how small, is enough to begin again. But there is also the possibility that your purpose will never feel solid in the way you want it to, that it will always move, always shift, always force you to adapt. If that's the case, maybe the goal isn't to capture it at all, but to learn how to live inside the haze without losing yourself. To stop trying to hold the smoke, and instead let it swirl around you as you walk forward. The days when purpose feels like smoke are not failures. They are invitations to listen more closely, to trust more deeply, to accept that clarity may come in fragments instead of whole pictures. And sometimes, in the middle of living without certainty, you stumble into a moment so clear, so undeniable, that it takes your breath away. You see exactly why you've been doing what you've been doing, and for a second, the smoke parts to reveal the fire in full. It won't last. It never does. The smoke will return, but you'll remember that moment, and it will be enough to keep you moving until the next one. Purpose may not always be something you can hold, but it can be something you feel, in your lungs, in your bones, in the pull of your own life. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's always been enough. We live so much of our lives in a place that doesn't exist. We call it the future, and it's always just ahead, waiting for us, or so we believe. It's where we store our plans, our dreams, our hopes, our excuses. It's where the better version of ourselves will finally live. It's the place where we'll be calmer, healthier, more fulfilled. The future is our imaginary home, the address we give to the life we've been postponing. But here's the truth. You already know somewhere deep down, the future never actually arrives. It's a moving target. Every time you get to what was once the future, it has already shifted further ahead. The day you were once waiting for becomes the present, then the past. In the space of a breath, the future you were counting on dissolves into memory before you even notice it's here. Think of how often you've told yourself, when this is over, I'll start living differently. When I have more money, when the kids are older, when I'm out of this job. These whens form a long glittering chain you drag behind you, each link a promise that never turns solid. And yet, you keep adding links, convinced that one day you'll reach the final one, step through it, and find the life you've been picturing. The problem isn't that the future doesn't exist. It will, in some form, as long as you keep breathing. The problem is that the future is not a fixed place you can reach. It is constantly being reshaped by the choices you make now. Every moment you spend waiting for it is a moment you could have spent creating it. This is why so many people arrive at middle age or old age with the uneasy feeling that they've been preparing for something that never began. They've been living in a perpetual rehearsal, convinced the real show starts later, but later never came, because later isn't real, only now is. When you chase the future too hard, you forget how to inhabit the present. You treat the moment you're in as a stepping stone, instead of a destination. You don't look closely at the person across from you because you're thinking about where you need to be next. You don't savor the taste of the meal because you're already planning the next one. You don't feel the ground under your feet because your mind is running ahead to a place your body hasn't reached. The strange thing is that when you stop chasing, the future starts to take care of itself. When you give your full attention to what you have now, the next moment is built on a foundation of presence instead of absence. The future you create this way is less about what you planned and more about what you inhabited. Of course, you will still have goals. You will still imagine what's ahead. The future can be a useful compass, but it can't be your home. If you live there entirely, you miss the only doorway you can actually walk through, the present. Ask yourself, how much of your life have you spent waiting? Waiting for the right mood, the right number in the bank account, the right body, the right permission. And while you waited, how many moments passed quietly into the archive of too late? The truth is, the future is always arriving in disguise, as ordinary days. You rarely recognize it when it gets here. That dream trip you've been planning for years, when it finally happens, it's just a Tuesday in another place. That milestone you've been chasing, you hit it, feel a rush for a moment, and then you're thinking about the next thing. This isn't cynicism, it's liberation. Once you understand that no future will ever feel complete in the way you imagine, you can stop holding your life hostage for it. You can let yourself have small joys now, instead of saving them for later. You can speak the words, take the risk, start the project, without waiting for some perfect moment that will never announce itself. The irony is that when you live this way, you end up with a future worth having, not because you chased it, but because you built it in the only place you could hear. Every day you spend fully present becomes part of the future you'll eventually step into, and when you arrive there, it won't feel like a stranger. It will feel like home because you've been living in it all along. The future will keep moving. No matter how fast you try to catch it, you will never pin it down. But you can stop being the person who's always almost there, and start being the person who is entirely here. And maybe that's the only way to touch the future at all, by realizing it's been folded into the present the whole time. There are lessons you can learn from books, from mentors, from years of lived experience, and then there are the lessons that only death can teach. Lessons so deep and unavoidable that you cannot ignore them once they arrive. Death is not a teacher you seek out, but one who eventually finds you, whether you're ready for the lesson or not. Most of us meet death's teachings indirectly, through the loss of others, a friend gone too soon, a family member whose absence changes the shape of every holiday, even a public figure whose passing shakes you in a way you didn't expect. These moments pull the curtain back for a brief, blinding instant, showing you the truth you usually keep tucked away. Nothing you love is guaranteed to last. It's in that truth that death begins its work as a teacher. It strips away the illusion of permanence. It makes you see that every conversation, every shared meal, every quiet evening with someone you care about is not just another entry in an endless ledger. It is one fewer you will ever have. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes sacred. The strange thing is that this awareness rarely lasts. We have a way of forgetting. After the funeral, after the tribute, after the first waves of grief subside, we slip back into the trance of routine. The urgency fades. We go back to thinking we have more time than we do. But death's lesson doesn't vanish. It waits. It knows it will teach you again as many times as it takes. For some, the lesson comes more directly, in a hospital bed, in the aftermath of an accident, in the quiet moment when the body falters and you realize just how close the edge is. These are the times when the abstract truth of mortality becomes concrete, when you feel the fragility of your own breath, your own heartbeat, and in that moment, the petty concerns that once consumed you shrink to almost nothing. The deadlines, the grudges, the minor inconveniences, all of it falls away. Death teaches that what matters most is rarely what you thought. You begin to measure life not in achievements, but in presence, not in possessions, but in connections, not in how much you've done, but in how deeply you've lived. It also teaches the value of letting go. You learn that clinging too tightly, to people, to moments, to identities, does not preserve them. It only makes their eventual loss more painful. Death shows you that nothing can be held forever, and in that realization, you might discover a strange kind of freedom, the ability to love without ownership, to experience without needing to control, to appreciate without demanding permanence. The most profound students of death are often those who work closest to it. Nurses, hospice workers, funeral directors. They see what most of us avoid. They hear the last words, the regrets, the reconciliations, and over time, they learn a truth the rest of us keep trying to sidestep. The way you live now is the way you will meet your end. If you live in fear, you will likely die in fear. If you live in peace, you will likely meet death with peace. But death doesn't just teach about endings, it also teaches about beginnings. Every time you face loss, you are reminded that your own story is still being written. You still have pages left, and you still have the choice of how to fill them. That knowledge can be paralyzing, or it can be the fire that wakes you up. If you listen closely, death will also teach you not to wait to say what needs to be said. The people you love are here now. You are here now. And now is the only time you can be certain of. There will always be reasons to wait, to make the trip later, to have the conversation later, to offer forgiveness later. Death strips away those reasons, and leaves only the question, what if there is no later? This is not about living in dread. Death is not a lesson in fear. It is a lesson in clarity. It shows you that the trivial is trivial, the precious is precious, and the clock is always moving. It teaches you that your life is not defined by how long it lasts, but by how fully you inhabit the days you have. And perhaps its greatest lesson is this. Death is not the opposite of life. It is the frame around it, the boundary that gives it shape. Without an ending, life would be an endless blur, a story without resolution. Death makes the moments matter, because it makes them countable. You don't have to wait until the end to learn what death is trying to teach you. You can start now by treating each day as something finite, by loving people as if this might be the last time you see them, by choosing not to waste what little time you have on things that don't make you more alive. Death is the teacher, none of us asked for, but all of us will learn from. The only question is whether you will hear its lesson in time to live differently, or only in time to wish you had. You wake up, and the day is already familiar. The same walls, the same morning light, slanting across the floor, the same sequence: brush your teeth, make the coffee, check the same emails. You move through it almost without thinking, like a well-rehearsed dance you never meant to learn. At first, the repetition feels harmless, even comforting. Routine can be a shelter, a way to make sense of time. But over weeks, months, years, the edges start to blur. Days fold into each other until you can't tell them apart. Monday is Wednesday. Wednesday is Saturday. You stop remembering specific moments because they all feel like the same one. This is the loop of repeating days. It's not a trap you step into deliberately. You slide into it quietly, lulled by the comfort of sameness. The days don't announce themselves. They just arrive, already wearing the face of yesterday. The danger isn't in having routines. Those can be grounding, even necessary. The danger is in letting routine become the only shape your life takes. You can wake up one morning and realize you've been living the same 24 hours for the past 5 years. Different dates on the calendar, yes, but the same day all the same. You notice it in the conversations you have, the recycled stories, the predictable responses, the way laughter feels rehearsed. You notice it in your body, the same commute muscles, the same afternoon slump, the same way your eyes glaze over at 9 p.m. because tomorrow will look exactly like today. And here's the unsettling truth. Time passes faster in the loop. The brain doesn't store many new memories when days are identical. Your life feels shorter because your mind has less to hold on to. A decade can pass this way and feel like a year, not because time sped up, but because you stopped marking it with anything worth remembering. This is how people reach old age and wonder where it all went. It went into the loop, into days that looked and felt so similar, they might as well have been one long, unbroken stretch. Breaking the loop doesn't always require dramatic changes. You don't need to quit your job or move across the world. Sometimes it's as simple as introducing one new variable, taking a different route home, eating at a table you've never sat at, starting a conversation you wouldn't normally have. These small shifts break the brain's expectation of sameness, and suddenly, time slows down again. But change is uncomfortable, and that's why so many of us avoid it. The loop feels safe. You know what to expect. You know how the story goes. There's no risk of failure, because there's no risk at all. Yet that safety comes at a cost. It trades the vividness of life for its predictability. The loop doesn't just steal time, it steals curiosity. You stop looking for what's new because you've decided there's nothing new to find. You stop asking questions because you think you already know the answers. You live in a shrunken version of the world, walking the same narrow path until the end. Sometimes, the only thing that can jolt you out of the loop is loss. A sudden change you didn't choose, a move, a breakup, a death, something that cracks the structure of your days and forces you to see that time was passing whether you noticed it or not. And in the shock of that change, you realize how much you've been missing. But you don't have to wait for life to break the loop for you. You can break it yourself. Gently but deliberately. Go somewhere without a plan. Try something you might fail at. Rearrange the furniture in your home so the light falls differently on your mornings. Invite someone new into your world. Read a book you would never normally pick up. These changes don't just alter your schedule, they alter your perception. They remind you that time is not an endless stretch of identical days. It's a series of moments that only exist once. Even the smallest shift can turn a day from forgettable to unforgettable. And maybe that's the real danger of the loop. Not just that it compresses your life into a blur, but that it makes you forget you have the power to shape your days at all. You start living as if the pattern was given to you, instead of something you are making with every choice. One day, the loop will end, whether you want it to or not. The repetition will break in the most final way possible. When that day comes, the question will be simple. Did you live many days or just one, repeated over and over until there were no more left? If you can feel the sameness closing in now, you still have time to change the answer. Step out of the loop, even if only for a moment. Make this day different in some small, undeniable way. Let it be one your mind decides to keep. Regret is a quiet thief. It doesn't rush in, snatch something from your hands and vanish. It works slowly, sitting beside you, whispering reminders of what you didn't do, what you should have said, where you should have gone. At first you think you can ignore it, but the longer it stays, the more it changes how you experience time itself. Regret doesn't just live in the past. It reaches into the present, dulling your enjoyment of what you have. It reaches into the future, making you hesitant to take risks, because you're afraid of creating more of it. It seeps into every hour, turning minutes into long, heavy shadows. And while you think you're simply remembering, what you're actually doing is spending. Every moment you give to regret is a moment you'll never get back. Some regrets are small. You wish you'd gone to a certain party, or bought that thing you hesitated over, or spoken up in a meeting. These sting briefly, like paper cuts, and then fade. But other regrets grow roots. They settle deep. The relationship you didn't fight for, the dream you abandoned, the apology you never made. These are the ones that don't just hurt. They reshape your sense of who you are. The most dangerous thing about regret is how it alters the speed of your days. When you dwell on the past, the present feels like it's barely moving, because you're not truly in it. You're replaying old moments, running them over and over in your mind like an endless film reel. The hours pass, but you're elsewhere, staring backward, letting now dissolve unnoticed. You can lose years this way. Entire decades can blur because you were too busy reliving something that could no longer be changed. And while you're lost in those old rooms, the world moves on without you. People grow older, opportunities vanish. The clock doesn't care that you're stuck. It keeps ticking. Regret can also paralyze the future. If you let it, it will teach you to be cautious in all the wrong ways, not by protecting you from harm, but by convincing you that inaction is safer than trying. You tell yourself, I won't risk this choice, because I might regret it later. But in doing so, you guarantee a different kind of regret, the regret of never knowing what could have been. The irony is that the only real cure for regret is the very thing regret often prevents: action, taking the risk, making the call, saying the words. These choices might lead to mistakes, yes, but they also lead to motion, and motion is the enemy of regret's stillness. There's a point where you realize that regret doesn't come from making the wrong choice. It comes from refusing to choose at all. Wrong choices can be corrected, learned from, even celebrated later for where they led you. But the choices you never made, those have no story. They are just empty space where life could have been. The hardest truth is that some regrets can't be undone. The person is gone. The moment has passed. The path you didn't take is overgrown beyond recognition. These are the ones that hurt the most, because they force you to live with the knowledge that you can't fix them. But even here, regret doesn't have to keep eating your time. You can let it feed you instead, as a reminder not to make the same mistake again, not to let the next chance pass in silence. You can't always stop regret from arriving, but you can stop it from unpacking and staying forever. You do that by filling your days with enough presence, enough deliberate living, that there's no space for it to settle. When you give your hours to something worth remembering, regret loses its appetite. Think of time as a table. Regret will sit down uninvited, but it only gets to eat if you serve it. You can set the table with memories you wish were different, and watch it feast on them until nothing's left. Or you can set the table with what's here now, with action, with connection, with beauty, and leave regret staring at an empty plate. One day, your clock will stop. Between now and then, there will be mistakes, missed chances, and words you wish you'd spoken differently. That's unavoidable. But if you live fully in the hours you have, regret will become a visitor, not a permanent resident. It will stop being the thing that eats your time, and become the thing that taught you how to protect it. Memory is the only way you can hold on to the past, but it comes with a cost. Time, it seems, has made a bargain with memory, and it's one that benefits neither of them fully. You are allowed to keep certain moments, but never exactly as they were. In exchange for the ability to remember, you lose the ability to experience them again in their true form. It starts small. A conversation you once had plays back in your mind, but the voice is slightly wrong. The room is lit differently than it really was. You can't tell whether the words you recall are the exact ones spoken, or ones you've rewritten over the years. The memory remains, but it's no longer a perfect record. It's a painting you've touched up so many times, you're not sure where the original strokes are. This is the cruel part of the bargain. The moments that mattered most to you are the ones you change without meaning to. You can still see the smile of someone you've lost, but you can't be sure you're seeing it as it truly was, or as your longing has shaped it. You can replay the best day of your life, but each replay makes it a little less about the day, and a little more about the way you wish it had been. Time enforces this bargain relentlessly. The further you get from an event, the more it blurs, no matter how much you fight to hold it in focus. Even the sharpest, most vivid memory eventually softens around the edges, and when you try to grasp it tightly, it shifts. The details rearrange themselves, the sequence changes, the emotions sharpen or fade in ways you can't predict. Part of this is the mind's way of protecting you. Some moments are too heavy to carry unchanged. Grief would crush you if it stayed as raw as it was in the first hours. Regret would burn if it stayed at its original heat. So memory dulls some things for your survival, but it also, in the same breath, dulls joy. It sands down the ecstatic edges of the best moments until they are warm but no longer electric. And yet, without memory, you would lose yourself entirely. You are built from what you've lived, and what you've lived is held together by the threads of recollection. Without them, every day would be a stranger to the next. You wouldn't be able to tell your own story, or even know there was a story to tell. This is why the bargain, though cruel, is also necessary. You can't live without memory, and you can't keep memory without time taking something from it. There's another layer to the cruelty. The more often you revisit a memory, the less reliable it becomes. Every time you recall it, you're not pulling up the original, you're pulling up the last version you remembered. Then you save that version, slightly altered by the act of remembering, back into your mind. Over years the memory becomes a copy, of a copy, of a copy, still precious, but not untouched. This is why photographs can feel both comforting and disorienting. They show you details your mind has long since lost, but they can also overwrite your internal version. You begin to remember the photo, not the moment. You remember the stillness of the image, not the movement and chaos of the real thing. The bargain means you must choose protect the memory as it lives in you, or reinforce it with proof that might change it forever. Some people try to fight this bargain by obsessively recording their lives, videos, journals, constant documentation. But even then, time finds a way in. Watching the video years later, you may see your younger self, but you can't be them again. You feel the distance like a physical ache. The recording keeps the shape of the moment, but the life inside it has gone. So what do you do with such an unfair exchange? Maybe you stop trying to preserve moments exactly as they were, and focus instead on preserving the feeling they gave you. Feelings, strangely, can survive time's edits better than details. You may not remember what you were wearing, or the exact words said, but you can remember the weight of a hug, the rush of joy, the taste of relief. You can also make peace with the fact that some memories will fade entirely, and that this isn't always a loss. If every detail of your life stayed sharp forever, you'd be overwhelmed. Forgetting is as essential as remembering. It's what makes space for new moments to arrive. The bargain may be cruel, but it keeps you moving forward. One day, all your memories will belong to someone else's stories, told in their words, shaped by their own time, and they too will alter. In this way, you are part of a chain of imperfect remembering that stretches far beyond you. The bargain isn't just yours, it's humanity's. Time will keep taking. Memory will keep holding what it can, and between the two, you will keep living, making new moments that will one day join the collection, changed, softened, but still yours, for as long as you can carry them. Before there were clocks, there were shadows. People measured time by the way light shifted across the ground, by the length and angle of darkness cast from a stick or a stone. The shadow was not the hour itself, only its sign, proof that something had passed, that the sun had moved, that life had inched forward. In many ways you still live by shadows. You may not notice them as clearly, but your life is full of markers that tell you time has gone. The lines appearing on your face, the stretch marks on your skin, the empty chairs at your table, the seasons you cycle through more quickly than you once did. You may not be looking at a sundial, but you are always standing in some form of its shade. The shadow that marks the hour is often subtle. You don't see it growing until you compare it to what it was before. Years can pass without your noticing how far it stretched, until a photograph, an anniversary, or a sudden memory makes you realize how much has shifted. You think, wasn't that just yesterday? But it wasn't. The shadow has been moving the whole time. It's easy to resent these shadows. They remind you that time is not yours to command. They show you that the light is moving toward evening, no matter how much you want it to stay at noon. But the shadow is not your enemy, it is your witness. It is proof that you have stood here, that the light has touched you, that you have occupied this moment in a way no one else could. Sometimes the shadow is long because you are in a low place. You've fallen, or been brought down, and the sun is high above you. You may think this means you've wasted time, but even here the shadow is still marking your presence. Even here, it's keeping track of your hours, your survival, your persistence. Other times the shadow is short, because you are close to the source, standing tall in the center of the day. In those moments, it feels like you've finally caught up to your life, like you are in step with the light itself. But noon does not last, and it isn't meant to. The shadow will lengthen again. That's not a failure, it's the cycle. The danger is in ignoring the shadow altogether. When you refuse to see how it changes, you drift into the illusion that you have more hours than you do. You live as if the sun will never dip toward the horizon, as if the darkness will never come. And then, one day, you look down and realize the shadow has grown so long it has almost touched the edge. There is a discipline in watching your own shadow, not obsessing over it. That way lies fear and paralysis, but noticing it enough to understand that the day is finite. It keeps you honest about what you're spending your light on. It asks you whether the way you're standing now is how you want to be remembered when the sun finally sets. Shadows also remind you that you are part of something larger. Your shadow exists because of the sun, the earth, the laws of physics that have been in place long before you and will remain long after. Time is not just yours, it is the world's. Your hours are borrowed light, and your shadow is the receipt. And there's beauty in that. The shadow that marks the hour is also a record of your movement. Stand still, and it shifts without you. Walk forward and it trails you, stretching and bending with your steps. It is proof that you are not frozen, that even when the days feel repetitive, something is still changing. One day, the shadow will disappear. Not because it has failed, but because the light has gone. That moment will come for all of us. The question is whether you will have lived in such a way that the hours it marked were worth the light that made them. Until then, pay attention to the shadows. They are quiet, patient, and honest, in a way the clock will never be. They don't lie about how much time has passed. They don't dress it up in numbers and mechanical ticks. They simply show you without judgment where you are in the day. And if you watch closely enough, they can teach you how to live while the light is still here. Most people would never say it out loud, but deep down they live as though death is something that happens to other people. It's not that they believe they're immortal. They know, in theory, that one day they'll die. But theory is distant. It's abstract. In practice they move through the world as if the supply of days is endless, as if the end will send a polite letter before arriving. This is what it means to live, as if you'll live forever. You postpone the things that matter. You let days pass without noticing them. You assume that the people you love will always be there to call, that the opportunities you've ignored will circle back, that your own body will keep working the way it does now. You tell yourself there's no rush, because you believe in some buried, unexamined way that the clock is not really ticking for you yet. This way of living is comfortable. It lets you avoid urgency. It makes risk feel unnecessary, because why rush into anything when there will always be more time? It softens the sharpness of choice. If you have infinite days ahead, it doesn't matter how you spend this one. You can waste it, because there will be another, and another, and another. The problem, of course, is that this belief is an illusion. The truth is that your life is finite, and every day you treat as disposable is one you will never get back. The trouble is that you usually don't realize you've been living as if you're immortal until something shatters the illusion. A close call, a sudden loss, a doctor's voice speaking in careful, measured tones. These moments are like cold water thrown on your sleeping face. They remind you that you are not exempt. But even these shocks fade. You might live differently for a while, more aware, more present, more willing to take risks. You might call your parents more, spend less time on meaningless obligations, say yes to experiences you would have put off. And then, slowly, the comfort of the old illusion creeps back in. You start thinking you can afford to waste time again. You start acting as if the supply will never run out. Living as if you'll live forever is seductive, because it's easy. Urgency is hard. Urgency forces you to ask hard questions. What am I doing with my life? Who matters to me? What am I willing to give my time to? These questions demand change, and change is uncomfortable. It's easier to keep pretending there's no deadline than to face what your answers might require. The irony is that accepting your own mortality doesn't shorten your life, it deepens it. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start noticing the moments you do have, the morning light on your kitchen table, the way your friend's voice cracks when they laugh, the fact that this exact day will never happen again. Mortality makes these details urgent, and in that urgency, they become precious. You don't have to live in constant panic about the end. That's not the point. The point is to stop living as though the end isn't real, to make choices that reflect the truth, that your time is limited, not in fear, but in reverence, to give your attention to the things that will still matter to you when your last hour comes. Ask yourself, if you had only 1 year left, what would you keep in your life exactly as it is? What would you remove? What would you finally start? You don't have to act as if the clock is about to run out tomorrow, but you can act as if it is running because it is. One day, you will be right about the fact that it's your last day. You won't know it when you wake up. You'll go through your morning thinking there will be another sunrise, another set of hours to spend, but the truth will be that this is it. And when that day comes, the question will be simple. Did you live like someone who knew time was finite, or like someone who thought forever was promised? Living as if you'll live forever is a choice you can unmake at any moment. You can decide today to live as if the days matter, as if the people you love are not guaranteed, as if your own body is not indestructible. You can choose to let the reality of your mortality sharpen your life instead of avoiding it. Because the truth is, forever isn't coming, but right now is, and right now is all you've ever really had. There comes a point in some lives when the body can no longer keep pace with what the mind or the heart still longs to do. The will remains fierce, the vision still clear, the desire to act undiminished, but the body, that fragile vessel, begins to resist. You feel it in the slowing of your steps, the stiffness in your joints, the heaviness in your breath. You notice it when tasks that once felt effortless now require strategy, planning, or surrender. This is the moment when purpose outruns the body. It is not the same as losing purpose. In fact, it often happens when your sense of meaning is stronger than ever. You know exactly what you want to contribute, create, or experience, but your physical self has begun to betray the pace you need to make it happen. The betrayal is gradual. At first, you simply need more rest. You put off certain activities because you're tired, telling yourself you'll get to them next week, then next month, then next year. Eventually, you begin to understand that later may not be possible in the way you imagined. The gap between what you want to do and what you are able to do widens, and you begin to live in that gap. This can happen in old age, but it can also arrive unexpectedly early, through illness, injury, or sheer bad luck. A young athlete's career, cut short by one wrong turn of the knee, a parent sidelined by chronic pain, while their children still run wild around them. A mind sharp with ideas trapped inside a body that cannot keep up with the work it takes to bring them into the world. The temptation when you reach this place is to mourn the difference endlessly. You look at what you could have done if the body had stayed strong, at the paths that are now closed to you. You measure yourself against the version of you who once could do these things and feel as though you are failing in comparison. But here's the truth. The body will always eventually slow, whether it happens suddenly or over decades. There will come a day when your purpose, if it is still alive in you, moves faster than your physical form. The question is not whether this will happen, but what you will do when it does. Some people let the gap become a graveyard. They bury their purpose alongside their lost abilities, convincing themselves that if they can't do things the way they once did, they can't do them at all. They withdraw. They stop trying. Their days grow small. Others adapt. They find new ways to express the same drive, even if it means changing the scale or method entirely. The musician whose fingers can no longer move quickly enough to perform becomes a teacher, passing the music into new hands. The traveler who can't walk far learns to see the world through the words of others, through books, films, and conversations that keep the horizon alive in the mind. The activist who can't march anymore becomes the voice that organizes, writes, or inspires from a chair. Adapting is not the same as giving up. It is acknowledging that the form of your purpose is less important than its existence. A fire that burns in a smaller space still burns, and sometimes in the narrowing, it becomes even more intense. There is also a strange gift in this slowing down. It forces you to choose more carefully. When you can't do everything, you must decide what truly matters. You stop scattering your energy on obligations that don't align with your purpose. You become deliberate. The body's limits become a kind of editor, cutting away the noise so the signal can be heard more clearly. This doesn't mean it's easy. There will be grief for what you've lost. There will be frustration in the moments when your mind surges forward and your body refuses to follow. But there can also be pride in what you still manage to do within the limits you face. Purpose doesn't need a perfect vessel. It needs a willing one. And sometimes, purpose itself changes when the body slows. What once drove you to act may give way to a new calling, one that could only emerge in the quieter pace your body now demands. The runner who can no longer compete might find their purpose in mentoring the next generation. The worker who can't keep the same hours might discover meaning in relationships they were too busy to nurture before. When purpose outruns the body, it's easy to feel like you're falling behind. But maybe you're not behind at all. Maybe you're simply in a new part of the race, one where the measure is not speed or output, but depth, clarity, and the ability to keep showing up in whatever way you can. In the end, the body will stop completely. The purpose you carried will either pass to others or dissolve into the silence you leave behind. But until that day comes, you have a choice to see your physical limits as the end of your meaning, or as a call to shape it differently. Because while the body will one day fail, purpose has a way of finding new forms, and if you let it, it will keep moving through you, at whatever pace you can manage, until the very last step. Imagine a small workshop tucked away on a quiet street. Inside, the air smells faintly of oil and wood, and the only sounds are the soft scrape of tools and the steady tick of dozens of clocks. Some are tall and ornate, with heavy brass pendulums. Others are small and delicate, their gears so fine they can barely be seen. All of them, in their own way, are measuring the same thing, the slow, relentless passing of time. The clockmaker moves among them, not in a hurry, because the work cannot be rushed. He understands that a clock is only as strong as the smallest part inside it. A gear a fraction too thin, a spring wound too tightly, a hand mounted at the wrong angle. Any of these can throw the whole mechanism off. He works knowing that perfection is not permanent. Every clock will need tending again. The clockmaker's secret lesson is that this is true for you too. Your life is a mechanism. Each choice you make, each habit you form, each relationship you keep or neglect, all of these are gears and springs inside the machinery of your days. Ignore one for too long, and the rhythm begins to falter. You may not notice at first. A few lost minutes here, a few missed opportunities there, but slowly the hands start to drift away from the truth. The beauty of the clockmaker's work is that it is not about stopping time. That is impossible. It is about keeping time honest. A well-kept clock doesn't make the hours last longer, but it makes them accurate. The lesson here is that you cannot stretch your life beyond its limit, but you can make sure you are truly living the hours you have, instead of losing them to drift and neglect. Sometimes, the clockmaker opens a timepiece that has been left untouched for years. The inside is dark with dust, the gears stiff from disuse. But he doesn't throw it away. He cleans each piece, replaces what's broken, winds it carefully, and listens. Slowly, the ticking returns. In the same way, your own life can feel frozen, misaligned, too far gone, and yet, with patience and attention, it can begin to move again. There is another part of the lesson though, and it is harder to accept. The clockmaker knows every clock he repairs will one day stop for good. There is no such thing as a mechanism that runs forever. His work is not about defeating that truth, but honoring it, giving each clock the dignity of running well while it still can. For you, this means accepting your own limits, not as a reason to despair but as a reason to care for your time more fiercely. People often think of life in years, but the clockmaker doesn't. He thinks in seconds. A second is a small thing, easy to overlook, but without it, no minute exists. Without minutes, there are no hours. Without hours, no life. The way you use your seconds, the smallest, most invisible pieces of your time, determines the shape of the whole. The secret lesson is that the grand sweep of your life is built from countless moments that feel too small to matter, but matter completely. Sometimes a customer will bring in a clock that keeps perfect time, but no longer chimes. It still functions, but it has lost its voice. This, too, is a lesson. You can move through life hitting every deadline, meeting every expectation, yet lose the part of you that makes the hours sing. A life without its chime may still run, but it will feel empty. The clockmaker would tell you to fix that first. And there's one more secret he knows. Clocks run in cycles. The pendulum swings forward and back, the gears rotate in endless loops, the hands circle the same face over and over. It can look like nothing changes, but inside the mechanism, each movement is carrying you forward. Your life will have cycles too, seasons that feel like repeats of what came before, The lesson isn't to avoid them, but to make sure that with each return, you are carrying something learned from the last time. In the end, the clockmaker's work is quiet, almost invisible. When the clock is repaired, no one thinks about the hours he spent bent over the bench. They simply hear the ticking and trust it. Your work with your own time is like that. No one may notice the care you take in keeping it true, but you will feel it in the steadiness of your days. And when your clock does stop, as all clocks do, the life you leave behind will be measured not just in how long it ran, but in how well it kept its time. Most days, you don't see it. It stays just out of sight. Like a figure standing at the far end of a long hallway, you go about your routines, making coffee, answering messages, walking down familiar streets, and it doesn't intrude, but it's there. It has always been there. Death doesn't tap you on the shoulder every morning. It's patient. It doesn't need to announce itself, because it knows its appointment with you can't be missed. It doesn't rush. It waits. And in its waiting, it becomes part of the background of your life, invisible but constant, as much a part of your existence as the air you breathe. Sometimes, you catch a glimpse, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quick flicker of recognition when you hear of someone your age who didn't wake up, or when you pass an ambulance on the road and wonder about the person inside. In those moments, the background figure takes a step forward, not close enough to touch you, but close enough for you to feel the shift in the air. Most of the time, you turn away, you distract yourself, you let the hum of daily life drown out the awareness. But even when you forget, death doesn't. It stands in its place, waiting with a patience no living thing can match. Its presence is not always ominous. For some, it is a motivator, a quiet reminder to live with more urgency, to love more openly, to waste less time on what doesn't matter. For others, it is a weight, pressing down with the knowledge that all of this will end, that no amount of planning or effort can prevent the eventual silence. How you see it depends on how willing you are to meet its gaze. There are moments when it steps closer without warning, a near accident, a medical scare, the sudden awareness of your own heartbeat thudding in your ears. These are the times when the background becomes the foreground, when death moves from a distant shadow to a presence standing just behind you. And then, when the moment passes, it retreats again, blending back into the edges of your vision, but never leaving entirely. You might think of death as something that arrives suddenly, but in truth, it's been walking toward you from the moment you were born. Every step you take through life is a step toward it, though not always at the same pace. Sometimes it lingers far behind, letting you run ahead. Sometimes it quickens its stride, closing the distance in ways you can't predict. The unsettling truth is that you can never know where it stands at this moment. It could be miles away, giving you decades of mornings, or it could be closer than you've ever realized, close enough that you've already passed your final birthday without knowing it. That uncertainty is part of the tension that shapes your life, the tension between living as if you have all the time in the world, and living as if you have only today. Some people respond to this uncertainty by pretending death isn't there at all, keeping their eyes fixed forward and their minds busy. Others make a kind of peace with it, acknowledging its place in the room, even if they don't invite it into conversation. The rare few learn to live with it, not in fear, but in awareness, letting its presence sharpen their sense of what's worth their hours. Because here's the strange thing. Death's role in the background is not only to end your story, it's also to frame it. Without that figure waiting at the edge, the days would lose their urgency. Without the knowledge that the end is inevitable, the moments you love might not feel so precious. Death's waiting shapes the meaning of life, not by taking it away, but by reminding you that it can be taken at any time. You can choose to see it as an intruder, or as a silent witness. You can resent it for its patience, or you can let that patience teach you to value the time it hasn't yet claimed. Every day it stays in the background is a day you are still here, still breathing, still able to shape what fills your hours. One day, it will step fully into view. You will not be able to look past it then, but until that moment, it remains where it is now, watching, waiting, reminding you in its quiet way that this life is temporary, and that the temporary is what makes it beautiful. Time rarely shows itself plainly. You won't often feel it moving, can't hear its footsteps, can't watch it pour from one container to another like water. Instead, it comes dressed in disguises, slipping through your days while you're looking the other way. Sometimes it wears the mask of productivity, the endless lists and meetings that make you feel like you're doing something important. Sometimes it hides in entertainment, in hours scrolled away, in shows that autoplay until the night is gone. Other times it dresses as rest, when in truth it's just avoidance wearing comfortable clothes. Because of these disguises, time can vanish without leaving the sting of loss. You don't notice the theft in the moment. You tell yourself you're just doing something for a few minutes, that you'll get to the real things later. But later is exactly where time goes to hide. Later is where it stores the hours you never see again. The distractions that guard these disguises are everywhere. They are designed to be irresistible, built to keep your attention long enough for time to slip past unnoticed. The phone that pings with a new notification, the task you start to avoid another, the sudden urge to clean your desk before beginning the work that matters. They don't feel dangerous, but that's the trick. They don't have to feel dangerous to take everything from you. Time rarely comes to you dressed as the most valuable thing you have. It comes disguised as just one more message, one more errand, one more video. It tells you that you'll get to the important things when you're done with these smaller ones. But the smaller ones never end. There is always another. And while you tend to them, the clock keeps moving in the background. It's not only technology or work that disguise time. Even good things can take its shape. Comfort can disguise itself as a full life. Routine can disguise itself as stability. You can wake up one day and realize that the disguise has been so convincing that you've forgotten what's underneath. That time has been leaving all the while, dressed as the safety you thought you needed. The cruelest disguise of all is the one that makes you believe you own time, that you can store it, save it, stack it neatly for later. But time is not a possession. It is a current. You don't hold it. You stand in it. You can drift, you can fight it, you can swim with it, but you cannot keep it still. Every second you believe you have captured is already gone. So what do you do when you realize how well time can hide? You start by learning to strip away the disguises. You notice when just one more has turned into half an hour. You pay attention to when you're busy without moving toward anything that matters. You catch yourself when you've been seduced by the false feeling of progress that comes from constant activity without direction. This doesn't mean you have to eliminate all distraction. Some distractions are part of living, the conversation that wanders off topic but deepens a friendship, the spontaneous detour that shows you something unexpected. The danger isn't in every distraction, it's in the ones that pull you away from what you truly want without you realizing they're doing it. You can also learn to use the disguises in your favor. If you know time often hides in small repeated acts, you can choose acts worth repeating, reading to your child, practicing a craft, walking in the evening light. These too are ways for time to pass quietly. The difference is that when you look back you won't regret where it went. But you can't do this if you don't train yourself to notice the shape of time beneath its costumes. This takes practice. It takes asking questions in the middle of your day. If I looked back from the end of my life, would I be glad I spent an hour on this? Not every hour has to be grand or productive, but each one is an exchange. You're trading a piece of your finite existence for whatever you're doing right now. The disguises work best when you forget that it's a trade at all. In the end, time's disguises and distractions will always be part of the landscape. You can't strip them all away, but you can get better at recognizing them, better at choosing when to engage and when to step back. You can refuse to let the best hours of your life be spent serving illusions. Because no matter how cleverly time hides itself, the truth is simple. It is moving, and you are moving with it. And the only real disguise worth wearing is one you choose, not the ones that steal your life while you aren't looking. Some people spend their whole lives searching for purpose, chasing it through careers, relationships, passions and places, hoping to find the one thing that makes their life feel aligned. But there's another kind of purpose, one you don't search for, one that is handed to you, often without asking. This is the purpose you never chose. It might arrive through circumstance. You're born into a family that needs you in a certain role. You inherit responsibilities from a parent, a sibling, a partner. You find yourself in a situation where others rely on you so completely that stepping away feels impossible. Or it may come through events beyond your control. An illness, an accident, a loss that reshapes your world and leaves you with a duty you never planned to carry. The strange thing is that this kind of purpose can feel both heavy and invisible. Heavy, because it shapes the path of your life in ways you can't undo. Invisible, because it often goes unrecognized by the world. You might not get titles or accolades for it. There are no awards for being the one who held things together when they were falling apart. No ceremonies for the years you put your own desires on hold. At first, you may resent it. You may feel that it's not fair, that you were forced into a story you didn't write. You look at people who seem free to chase their dreams, and you wonder what you could have done if you hadn't been bound to this role. You tell yourself you'll get to your real life later, once the burden is lighter, once the obligation is over, but later has a way of being delayed indefinitely. Over time, though, something shifts. You begin to see that even if you never chose this purpose, it has chosen you in return. It has shaped your strength, your patience, your ability to endure. It has taught you things you might never have learned otherwise. How to stay steady when things fall apart. How to care for others even when you're exhausted. How to find meaning in places where you never expected it. But the danger of the purpose you never chose is that it can quietly consume you. If you're not careful, it becomes the only identity you know. You forget who you were before it arrived. You forget that you are allowed to have desires beyond it. You start to think that wanting something for yourself is selfish, that stepping away from the role even briefly means you're failing. This is where the quiet work begins, learning to carry the purpose without letting it erase you, to accept that you have been given a role you didn't choose, while still carving out pieces of your life that belong only to you, to remember that the person you are outside the duty is not a betrayal of the person you are within it. Sometimes the purpose you never chose will align perfectly with the life you would have wanted anyway, but more often, it will pull you in a direction you didn't plan. The question then is not whether it's fair. Fairness is rarely part of life's design, but whether you can live fully inside it without disappearing into it. One day, the circumstances that gave you this purpose may change. The people who needed you so urgently may no longer need you in the same way. The role you played so long may suddenly dissolve, and you'll be left facing an empty space where it once stood. That moment can feel liberating, but it can also feel like grief, because even if you didn't choose this purpose, it became part of who you are. Letting it go can feel like losing a piece of yourself. The truth is, every purpose, chosen or unchosen, has an expiration date. The challenge is to live it well while it's yours, without letting it claim more of you than it should, to honor it without mistaking it for your entire identity. You may never have wanted this purpose, but you can decide how you meet it. You can meet it with bitterness, or with quiet dignity. You can see it as an obstacle, or as a path you didn't expect but might still lead somewhere worth going. You can let it define your life, or you can let it shape you while still keeping space for other stories to unfold. Because the purpose you never chose is still a purpose, and while it may not be the one you dreamed of, it can still be the one you live well. There is a strange clarity that comes when you know you are down to your last minute. It may not be exactly 60 seconds on a clock. It could be the last minute before a goodbye, the last minute before a decision you cannot undo, the last minute before the end of a life. But in that shrinking space of time, everything unnecessary falls away. For years you live under the illusion that there is time for everything. Time to explain, to fix, to say what you mean, to live the life you keep postponing. You waste days as if they were infinite, stacking them casually like coins in a jar you think will never empty. Then one day, the jar tilts, and you realize you have only one coin left. The last minute has a way of stripping the world to its essential truths. The petty arguments, the grudges you carried, the tasks that once felt urgent, they dissolve instantly. In their place are the things that mattered all along, the people you love, the moments you cherished without knowing, the words you wish you had said sooner. When the last minute arrives, you stop caring about the masks you wore. You stop pretending. There is no time to maintain the version of yourself you show to others. The real you, the one beneath the compromises, the roles, the distractions, comes to the surface. And that version is startlingly simple. It wants connection, forgiveness, presence. It wants to know it mattered. Sometimes, the last minute comes slowly, giving you time to prepare. You may watch the countdown approach from a distance, trying to bargain with it. Other times it ambushes you, leaving no space for graceful farewells. Either way, it forces the same question. If this is all you have left, what will you fill it with? You could fill it with regret, replaying every moment you squandered. Many people do. They let the final seconds be consumed by the ache of what they didn't do. But there is another choice. To let the last minute be a moment of pure presence. To see, even for that fleeting space of time, the staggering beauty of simply being here. You might notice the sound of your own breath, the way the light falls in the room, the warmth of a hand in yours. You might hear laughter from a memory you didn't know you'd kept. You might realize that the life you thought you wasted still contained infinite small treasures scattered along the way. The last minute teaches that all along, you didn't need more time to live. You needed to see the time you already had. You needed to be awake to it, to feel the weight of it while it was happening. The tragedy is that most people only learn this when there is no more time to apply it. If you could bring that clarity backward, into the thousands of minutes before the last one, everything would change. You would stop delaying the words you need to speak. You would give your attention to the people who matter, instead of the distractions that don't. You would stop living for some distant day when you believe you'll finally be ready. The last minute is not a gift in itself. It is too brief for that, but it is a mirror. It reflects the truth of how you lived all the minutes before it. And sometimes, even in its brevity, it allows for a final act of grace, a word of love, a gesture of peace, an unspoken but unmistakable forgiveness. When you are living inside it, the last minute feels like both everything and nothing. You cannot change the entire story, but you can change how it ends. You can choose to meet it with panic, or you can choose to meet it with stillness, letting the last thing you feel be gratitude instead of fear. And here is the strangest truth. Every minute could be the last minute. You never really know which one will be. You could be in it right now unaware that the clock is almost out. That means you have the chance, in this very breath, to decide how it will be spent. Maybe the point is not to wait until you see the last minute coming. Maybe the point is to live as if you are always in it, to let each moment hold the weight and clarity of an ending, and in doing so make it worthy of being one. The last minute's revelation is not about death alone. It is about life. It is about the urgency of being here now, about the fact that you never truly own the time you think you have. All you can do is step into each moment as if it is the last, and trust that when the real final one comes, you will have already been living in a way that makes it complete. There is a moment, subtle yet irreversible, when time and death meet in quiet agreement. They have always been partners, though we pretend they are separate forces, one counting the days, the other ending them. But there comes a point where they lean toward each other, exchange a knowing glance, and close the deal they've been making since the first breath you took. You feel this moment not in the sudden drama of tragedy, but in a deep, wordless recognition. Time has been moving forward all along. Yet it is only when death steps into the frame that you realize its true direction. Every second that passed was leading you here. Every morning you woke was one less you would have. For most of life, we imagine time as an open road, stretching endlessly ahead. Death, in contrast, is a wall we expect to meet far in the distance. But the truth is, stranger, the road and the wall are moving toward each other, and you are standing between them. One day, they meet in the middle, and you discover you were not on a road at all, but in a narrowing corridor. When time and death shake hands, illusions collapse. You stop believing in later. You see how often you traded the present for an imaginary future. You see how many of your decisions were shaped by a quiet, desperate hope that there would always be more time. And you realize, with both fear and relief, that there isn't. The fear comes first. It is sharp, like cold air in your lungs. You want to run backward, to reclaim the minutes that slipped through your fingers, to reopen the doors you closed without thought. But those doors are gone now, as if they never existed. The corridors behind you are shadows. Then the relief arrives. Unexpected, because if you cannot go backward, then the only place to be is here. The handshake between time and death strips life down to its rawest truth. You are alive in this single flickering moment, and nothing else is promised. The weight of that is heavy, but it is also freeing. This meeting of time and death is not an enemy's ambush. It is a teacher's lesson. It shows you that time was never yours to own. It was a loan, one you've been spending all along without noticing the terms. Death is not the thief of time. It is the one who reveals that the contract is ending. When you see the two of them together, you also see yourself more clearly. You see how you lived, not as a story of events, but as a series of exchanges. How many days you traded for approval. How many hours you traded for distraction. How many years you traded for comfort that dulled your spirit. And perhaps how many moments you traded for nothing at all. But there is another truth, softer and harder to face. You also see the moments you spent well, the afternoons that seemed ordinary, but were in hindsight, perfectly whole. The conversations that stayed with you, the laughter that became a part of your bones, the silence you shared with someone who understood you without words. These are the places where the handshake doesn't feel like loss, it feels like completion. You might imagine that when time and death meet, the world grows smaller, but sometimes it does the opposite. Sometimes, the boundaries you thought were solid dissolve. The hours may be numbered, but they expand in depth, as if each one now contains more of you than it ever did before. This is the paradox. Awareness of the end does not make life narrower, it makes it richer. Every taste, every touch, every breath becomes sharper in its detail. You begin to live in high resolution, noticing what you used to pass by, the way the light bends at dusk, the weight of a friend's hand on your shoulder, the small sound of your own footsteps in an empty hallway. And yet, the handshake is not something you can undo. Once you have seen the two together, you cannot return to the blind faith that there will always be more. You cannot numb yourself with the shallow distractions that once kept the days moving faster. Time slows down, but only because you are finally inside it. In the end, when time and death shake hands, you are faced with a choice. You can see their meeting as a sentence, a reminder that your days are counted and that you are powerless to change it. Or you can see it as an invitation to live so fully that when the final handshake comes, you will not wish for a single day back. The meeting is inevitable. Whether you acknowledge it or not, the handshake is being prepared in every passing second. But if you choose to meet it with open eyes, you can arrive at that moment not as a bystander, but as someone who has already shaken both their hands before. And perhaps that is the quiet secret they share when they meet, that the real tragedy is not in their handshake, but in the way most people live, as if it will never happen. The real grace is in knowing it will, and letting that knowledge shape every step you take until then. Purpose is not always the grand mission you spend decades chasing. Sometimes it is the smallest, most fragile thing, a thread of meaning that appears for an instant and is gone before you can even name it. We are taught to imagine purpose as a monument, something towering and permanent, but more often it is like a single drop of water catching the sunlight before it falls into the river. These moments are easy to miss. They arrive quietly, in places you rarely think to look. A conversation that lingers in your memory for years, a moment of unexpected laughter when everything else felt heavy, a small kindness, done without thought, that somehow changes the direction of someone else's day. These are not the kind of events people write history books about, yet they are the ones that shape the architecture of your life from within. We spend much of our existence chasing a purpose we expect to find somewhere in the future. We imagine that when it arrives it will announce itself with certainty, perhaps accompanied by applause, or at least the feeling of finally having figured it out. But the truth is different. Purpose often passes through your hands without introduction. You only recognize it later, looking back when you realize something small mattered more than you knew. There's a cruelty in this, but also a strange mercy. If purpose is hidden in passing moments, then you don't have to wait for a perfect day to find it. It can appear at the edge of any hour. You might find it while making tea, while sitting in traffic, while holding someone's hand as they cry. You might even find it in the way you pause to watch sunlight moving across the floor. The problem is that we are rarely paying attention. Time moves like a fast river, and we move with it, our eyes fixed on the far bank. We tell ourselves we'll slow down when we get there, but purpose doesn't live on the far bank. It lives in the water you're already standing in. It's in the current, not the destination. Passing moments are fragile because they refuse to wait. You can't store them for later. If you don't meet them now, they dissolve into the stream of what might have been. This is why they require a different kind of awareness, not the kind that looks for something specific, but the kind that notices everything. Sometimes, you discover purpose in a moment you didn't want. Loss, failure, disappointment. These are not usually welcome, yet they can reveal what you value most. They strip away the distractions and leave you face to face with what actually matters. In the quiet after something ends, you may notice that there is still something unbroken in you, something you would choose again, even knowing it would hurt. That too, is purpose. There's a temptation to think that purpose must be measurable, that it must produce visible results or leave something tangible behind. But what if purpose is not about permanence at all? What if it's about the weight a moment carries while it exists? A bird sings in the dark before dawn. Its song may never be heard again, yet it was still worth singing. When you live with this understanding, life begins to feel different. You stop waiting for the big thing to give your days meaning. Instead, you begin to look for the small sparks, and when you see them, you hold them without trying to trap them. A passing moment cannot be caged. It can only be met fully and let go. Ironically, this is how purpose grows. The more you pay attention to fleeting moments, the more they multiply. You notice the way someone's eyes soften when you really listen. You notice the warmth of your own breath on a cold morning. You notice how silence can be a kind of language when shared between people who trust each other. These are the things that fill the spaces between the milestones, the invisible threads that give the fabric of your life its strength. And yet, because they are small, they are often forgotten. The mind tends to record the louder events, the achievements, the losses, the changes in direction. But if you could unroll the full tapestry of your days, you would see that the foundation is built not from the extraordinary, but from these unremarkable instants. Purpose found in passing moments is not something you can plan for. You can only make yourself available to it. You do this by being present in the most ordinary hours, by resisting the urge to hurry through them on your way to something more important. The truth is, you don't know which moment will end up being the one that matters most. At the end, when time and death meet, these are the moments that come back to you. You may think you will remember the great victories, the dramatic turns, the long-awaited arrivals, but more often, what rises to the surface are flashes of simplicity, a late-night walk, a shared meal, the sound of rain against the window, the things that had no reason to be remembered, except that they meant everything in their quiet way. Perhaps that is the final lesson. Purpose is not something you find once and keep forever. It is something that visits you, again and again, in forms you do not expect. Your only task is to be there when it arrives. Because purpose, when found in passing moments, does not ask you to change the whole world. It asks you to be awake in this one right now before it becomes a memory you can never touch again. There is a clock inside you. You can't see it, but you can feel it in certain moments. The quiet sense that something is moving forward, second by second, no matter what you do. It doesn't tick in sound but in sensation, the way your breath changes with age, the way you grow into yourself and then slowly begin to grow out of yourself again. Most people imagine time as something outside, something measured by the hands of a watch or the numbers on a digital screen. But the truest clock is internal. It lives in your cells, in the slow march of replication and decay. Every moment, it counts down, not to an event you can predict, but to the moment when it will simply stop. You may forget this for long stretches. The busyness of daily life drowns out its rhythm. Work, errands, obligations, all these create a surface noise that hides the deeper pulse beneath. But occasionally, something cuts through, a scare in your health, a sudden loss. The sight of someone much older moving with a kind of careful slowness you've never yet had to consider. In those moments, you hear the clock inside you more clearly. This is not the same as panic, though panic often follows. The inner clock does not rush. It moves at exactly the pace it always has, but when you notice it, you feel both its steadiness and its certainty. It doesn't pause when you are happy. It doesn't slow down when you need more time. It doesn't speed up when you are bored. It simply moves, unbothered by your feelings about it. You are born into the ticking without knowing it. As a child, you live mostly in the present. Your sense of time barely formed. The hours stretch wide and generous. Summer afternoons feel endless. But as you age, the clock inside you becomes louder. You begin to measure not just hours, but years. The space between birthdays shrinks. The seasons seem to turn faster. You realize that the clock's pace never changed. Only your awareness of it did. This is why people say time goes faster as you get older. It's not that the seconds shorten. It's that you have fewer new moments to anchor them. The novelty fades and the brain compresses the familiar. You blink and another year has passed. You blink again, and you are older than you ever thought you would be. All the while the inner clock ticks on. Some people try to drown it out entirely. They keep themselves in constant motion. More goals, more distractions, more noise, anything to keep from hearing that steady, inescapable beat. But the clock is patient. It knows that eventually you will be quiet, and in that quiet, you will hear it again. Others choose to listen. They learn to live in harmony with it, not in defiance of it. They let the ticking remind them that nothing is guaranteed. Not another day, not another conversation, not another chance to say what they mean. For them, the clock is not a threat, but a compass. It doesn't tell them how much time they have, but it reminds them to use the time they do have. Well, still, there is a danger in listening too closely. If you stare at the inner clock long enough, it can begin to feel like a countdown. Every tick becomes a subtraction, a reminder of loss rather than life. The trick is to hear it without letting it drown out everything else. The sound is not there to scare you. It is there to teach you that life has shape because it has edges. If the inner clock never stopped, nothing would matter. Without endings, there would be no urgency, no reason to choose one path over another. It is the finiteness of time that makes each choice real. This is why the ticking is not your enemy. It is the frame around your days, the thing that gives them definition. Sometimes, you will feel the clock most in your body. The way it heals slower than it used to. The way certain aches no longer leave after a day's rest. Other times, you will feel it in your mind. The way certain memories become hazy, or how the faces of people long gone still feel near in one moment and impossibly distant in the next. Each of these changes is a tick. And yet, even as the clock counts down, it also counts up. Every day lived adds to the sum of your being. Every second is another mark on the story of who you have been. The ticking is not just toward an ending, it is also toward a fullness you could not have imagined when you began. You can't stop the inner clock, but you can choose how you live to its rhythm. You can rush, trying to outrun it. You can ignore it, pretending you have more than you do, or you can let it set the tempo of a life lived deliberately, where each hour is met rather than wasted. At the end, when the ticking fades, it will not matter how many years you had on the calendar. What will matter is how much you were awake for them. If you learn to hear the clock without fear, you will have found a strange kind of peace, the peace of knowing that your time was your own, even if it was never truly yours to keep. The clock inside you is still ticking now. You can feel it if you sit in silence for a moment. Not in your ears, but in your being. Every tick is an invitation. Be here now before the next one comes. Every life is a performance with no rehearsal. You step onto the stage without a script, unsure of the choreography, yet every movement you make becomes part of the final act. Somewhere in the distance, there is a curtain waiting to fall, and it is this awareness, whether you admit it or not, that shapes the way you move. Meaning and ending are not separate. They are dance partners bound by necessity. Without the ending, meaning would be impossible. Without meaning, the ending would be unbearable. The two pull against each other in a slow, graceful tension, each step influencing the other. You may think you live only for meaning, for love, for purpose, for legacy, but endings are what give those meanings shape. Imagine a story with no final page. The words would stretch into an endless horizon, each sentence losing weight as it drifts without closure. In life, as in stories, it is the finite that makes each moment precious. The dance between meaning and ending is not always comfortable. At times you want to believe in permanence, that the people you love will always be there, that your abilities will never fade, that the days ahead will stretch as far as you need them to. This is when you resist the ending, when you try to dance only to the music of meaning, but the song is incomplete without its final notes. Other times the awareness of ending becomes too heavy. You begin to see the clock in everything, the number of birthdays you might have left, the years until your body changes in ways you cannot stop, the inevitable losses that line the road ahead. In these moments, meaning feels fragile. You begin to wonder why you should dance at all if the music will only stop. The secret is balance. To dance with both, to let meaning and ending share the floor without one overpowering the other. Meaning gives the dance beauty, ending gives it urgency. Together they create a rhythm you can live to. Think about the way you treasure certain experiences more when you know they will not last. The last night of a trip, the final conversation before someone moves away, the fleeting glance of a loved one across a crowded room. These moments feel alive because the ending is close enough to touch. But there is another side to the dance. The way meaning can soften the ending. When you have lived in a way that feels true, the ending does not erase what came before. The song may be over, but the echoes remain in every person you touched, every small change you made in the world. The end becomes not an erasure but a punctuation mark, one that completes the sentence rather than destroys it. The difficulty lies in the fact that you rarely know when an ending will come. Life hides its finales in ordinary days. You do not get a warning before the last time you speak to someone, or the last time you see a place you love, or the last time a certain version of yourself exists. You only realize it after the fact, when the music has stopped and you are left standing in the silence. This uncertainty is what makes the dance so delicate. You must learn to treat every step as if it could be the last, not with fear but with presence. To speak as if each word matters, to act as if each gesture carries weight, to love as if each moment is a gift that will not return. Of course, you will fail at this often. The mind drifts, the rhythm slips. You move through days without noticing the music at all. This is natural. No dancer stays perfectly in time forever. But when you remember, when the awareness of both meaning and ending comes back to you, you can return to the floor and find your place in the steps again. Some people try to push the ending as far away as possible. They fill their days with busyness, stretch themselves thin with goals, and imagine they can outrun the silence at the song's end. Others embrace the ending too soon, retreating from meaning because they fear the pain of loss. Both approaches break the dance. In truth, the art is to move with both in mind, neither ignoring nor surrendering to either. If you look closely, you can see this dance playing out in every part of life. The petals of a flower opening only to fall. The way autumn's beauty comes from its impermanence. The way a candle's light depends on the slow burning of the wax. Beauty exists because it will vanish. Purpose exists because time will take it from you. And perhaps the most profound truth is that you are not dancing alone. Every person you meet is caught in the same rhythm. Some aware of it, others not. Some move with grace, others stumble, but all are heading toward the same stillness. To dance with others in this shared fate is to understand the depth of connection possible in a human life. When the day comes that the music stops for you, you will not take the dance floor with you. You will leave behind only the shapes you made while the song played, the ways you made others feel, the moments you chose to be present for, the traces of meaning that still hold even after the ending. Until then, the dance continues. You will step wrong sometimes. You will forget the rhythm. You will cling too tightly to meaning, or shy too much from ending. But you can always return to the center, feel both presences in the room, and let them guide you. The clock is ticking. The song is playing. The floor is yours. There will come a day when the clock no longer matters. No more alarms, no more deadlines, no more quiet panic over how much of the day is left. On that day, you will no longer measure yourself by the hours you've spent or the ones you have left. Time will still exist, but it will no longer belong to you. For some, this moment arrives at the end of life. The instant breath stops and the heart falls still. But becoming timeless is not always tied to death. Sometimes it happens in a moment of such total immersion in the present that the boundaries between past, present, and future dissolve. It could be a moment of joy, grief, awe, or surrender, the kind that feels outside the usual shape of life. The day you become timeless is not marked on any calendar. You cannot circle it in red or count down the weeks. It comes without warning, and it is only in its arrival that you understand what it is. For many, the first taste of it feels like the world holding its breath. The air is thicker, sounds are sharper, and you are aware of everything as if it's happening in slow motion. When time leaves you, you also leave the fear that comes with it. You are no longer racing to hold on to something that's slipping away. You stop grasping for more days, more hours, more minutes. Instead, you notice the fullness of the single moment in front of you. You realize you do not need more of them to feel complete. Only this one, fully lived. This can happen in quiet ways. Sitting by the bed of someone you love as they drift into sleep for the last time. Watching the sun rise over a horizon you know you will never see again. Holding a newborn. Feeling the strange collapse of your own history into the future you now cradle. These moments stretch into something beyond measurement. But there is a danger here too. Once you have touched timelessness, the return to clocks and schedules can feel harsh, almost cruel. You might long for the weightless feeling, the escape from the tick of seconds. Some spend their lives chasing it, through meditation, art, love, even danger, anything that can break the tyranny of time. And yet, the irony is that timelessness cannot be forced. It arrives uninvited, a guest you cannot summon by will. Becoming timeless is not the same as escaping responsibility or ignoring the life you must still live. Rather, it changes your relationship with time itself. You see it for what it is, not an enemy, not a master, but a container. One day the container will break, and you will spill into something else. That knowledge shifts the way you fill the hours you have. Some people experience the day they become timeless, long before they physically die, but never recognize it. They think it was just a strange dreamlike moment. Others mistake it for boredom, because it can feel so still, so empty of urgency. In truth, it is neither dream nor boredom. It is the purest state of presence you will ever know. You may even glimpse it in small, ordinary flashes. Laughter so deep you forget what you were laughing about. A long walk with no destination. The stillness after a storm when the air feels rewoven. In those fragments, you touch the edges of timelessness without even realizing it. The great paradox is that, to truly appreciate timelessness, you must live with the awareness of time's limits. It's the knowledge that the clock is ticking that makes these rare moments of suspension so powerful. Without the contrast, they would lose their depth. The canvas needs its frame. The music needs its silence. When the final day comes, the true day you become timeless in the absolute sense, You will not feel the clocks stopping. You will simply notice the absence of their weight. The hours will no longer press against you. You will not be waiting for the next thing to happen. You will simply be. What happens then is a mystery no one can map. Some believe you dissolve into nothing. Others believe you step into another form of existence, one where time has no hold. But whatever it is, the race is over. The dance with endings and beginnings is complete. You will have stepped out of the river and onto the shore. Until that day, your life is a balance between honoring time and occasionally forgetting it. You will wake to alarms, meet deadlines, watch years pile up, but in between, you will have moments that remind you of what's beyond them. Moments where you are not your past or your future, but simply the awareness moving through the present. The day you become timeless may be the last day you exist in the way you know yourself now, but perhaps that is not something to fear. Perhaps it is the point of all the days leading up to it, to learn how to let go of the ticking long enough to glimpse the world without its frame. If you can live your life with that in mind, then when the day arrives, it will not feel like a theft. It will feel like a return. And in that return, there will be no clock, no rush, no measure, only the quiet truth that you have arrived at the one place where time can never follow you. You have walked through clocks that devour lives, calendars that betray, hours that dissolve into smoke, and the quiet handshake between time and death. You have wandered into graveyards of wasted hours, stood in the stillness where seconds stretch into eternity, and felt the whisper of mortality in the wind. Every step along this path has been a reminder, not of how much time you have, but of how fragile the idea of having time truly is. If you have been listening closely, you will notice something strange. None of this was ever about time itself. It was always about you, how you live, how you choose, how you measure meaning in a space between two unknowns. Time is only the stage. You are both the actor and the fleeting performance. And when the curtain falls, the stage will still be there, but you will not. The mind resists this. It wants to believe that there will always be another sunrise, another conversation, another chance to set things right. But deep down, beneath the comfort of routines and tomorrows, you know the truth. Every day is a thinning rope, and every moment you are moving closer to the drop. This is not meant to sadden you. It is meant to wake you. Death, for all its shadows, is not the enemy here. It is the frame that makes the picture sharp, the silence that makes the music vivid. Without the awareness of endings, beginnings lose their urgency. Without the pressure of a ticking clock, purpose drifts. Time and death are not two separate forces chasing you from different sides. They are partners in shaping the story you live. The real danger is not that you will run out of time. It is that you will forget it is running at all. That you will live as if the seconds are infinite. As if you can always begin tomorrow. You cannot. Tomorrow is not a guarantee. It is a concept, a placeholder for a day that may never arrive. And yet, most people spend their lives preparing for tomorrows they never see. But if you are brave enough to see the truth, you will realize something quietly revolutionary. The only moment that matters is this one, not because it is all you have in some poetic sense, but because it is the only one that actually exists. The past is gone, the future is unwritten, and time itself is just the space between 2 points of unknowing. This is where purpose begins to transform. Purpose is not some grand design waiting to be discovered at the end of a long search. It is a living thing, built moment by moment, shaped by the way you spend the minutes you do have. When you understand this, you stop asking, "What is the meaning of my life?" and instead ask, "What is the meaning of this moment?" Because the answer to that question is the only one that will ever matter. Perhaps the greatest shift you can make is to stop thinking of life as something measured in years, and instead see it as a string of moments that matter, each one whole and complete on its own. If you can learn to inhabit these moments fully, without waiting for a better one, then you will have already stepped into the closest thing to timelessness you can experience while still alive. And when the final day comes, the day you step fully outside of time, it will not feel like a sudden theft. It will feel like the closing of a book you have read with care, one page at a time. You will not need to beg for more pages, because you will have read each one as if it were the last. The clock will still be there, ticking for the world you leave behind, but it will no longer have power over you. Death will no longer be a shadow on the horizon, but simply the horizon itself, a point you have been walking toward all along, whether you realized it or not. You may even find that death is not the end at all, but merely the final disguise of time, the last form it takes before it releases you. In that release there is no calendar, no countdown, No need to measure or hold on. There is only the quiet and whatever waits beyond it. So here is the truth you carry forward from all of this. Time is not your enemy, and death is not your punishment. They are your reminders. They are the forces that keep you from drifting, that pull you into the present, that shape the very meaning you seek. And if you can see them this way, you will stop fearing them and start learning from them. Because one day, sooner or later, you will stand in the final moment, looking back at all the ones before it. And when you do, the only question that will matter is whether you truly lived inside them, or whether you let them pass like shadows across a wall. Right now, in this exact moment, you have a choice. You can keep living as if time will always wait for you, or you can start living as if this is the moment you've been waiting for all along. If you choose the second path, you will not waste your life chasing tomorrows. You will not fill your hours with things that do not matter. You will not wait until you are out of time to understand its value. Instead, you will live like someone who knows the truth, that the clock is ticking, and that the beauty of life is not in stopping it, but in dancing to its rhythm. And maybe, just maybe, when the day comes that you become timeless, it will not feel like an ending at all, but the beginning of something even greater.